Hey guys, tonight we're going back, way back, to a time when the wind howled across endless plains, and the only walls between you and the stars were strips of buffalo hide stitched with sinew. You're standing there now, boots crunching on frost so fine it looks like spilled sugar. Your breath a ghostly ribbon that curls and disappears. The air is thin enough to sting your teeth. You can almost hear the question whispering through the cold. How did anyone sleep out here and live to see spring? You probably wouldn't survive this, let's be honest. But they did. And not just survive, they thrived. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. But only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, drop a comment telling me where you're listening from and what time it is there. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You trudge through snow that squeaks beneath your feet like tiny bones. Around you, the night is so open it almost feels like you could fall upward into it. Somewhere ahead, a dull glow winks between the tents, a circle of light stitched into the black. The first breath of wood smoke finds you, faint and sweet, the promise of warmth carried on a thread of wind. When you step closer, you realize the tents themselves are alive, shimmering slightly, the hides flexing like breathing skin as the air presses against them. This isn't just a random cluster of shelters. It's a pattern, a heartbeat. The people who live here understand that even the way you place your dwelling can be a matter of life or death. You duck beneath a flap and step into a dim interior that smells of smoke and fat and snow. The first thing that hits you isn't the heat, it's the softness of sound. The outside wind becomes a distant hum, like it's pressing its face to the walls and sighing. Your eyes adjust, and you see the glow of a central fire pit, ringed with stones, the flames licking low and steady. Around it are layers of hides and mats, carefully laid so no spark can jump where it shouldn't. There's a rhythm to how this space breathes, smoke curling upward, drawn through a small vent near the top. Somehow, even without chimneys or modern vents, it works. You realize you're standing in a perfectly balanced system, built through generations of trial, error, and long memory. Someone hands you a blanket. Well, not really a blanket, but a softened buffalo robe lined with rabbit fur. It's heavier than it looks. And when you drape it over your shoulders, warmth seeps in instantly, wrapping your bones in quiet relief. You sit down near the fire, and for a moment, you just listen. The crackle of wood, the low murmur of voices, the rustle of beads on clothing. There's laughter too, dry and smoky, like the sound of logs splitting. You notice how everyone's movements are slow, deliberate. Nothing is wasted here. Not a word, not a gesture. The old woman across from you dips a hand into a small pouch and sprinkles something into the flames. It flares green for a heartbeat before settling back to orange. You ask, and she tells you it's dried sage. Cleansing the air, she says. You believe her, though you can't decide if she means it spiritually, practically, or both. She smiles, toothless but radiant, and says something that sounds suspiciously like, "City folk never trust the air they breathe." You laugh, and she nods, approving your confusion. Outside, the wind moans again, but inside the teepee, it's as though time folds. You imagine the generations before her, families huddled just like this, listening to the same storm beat against the same kind of walls. Some historians still argue whether these hide tents were purely practical or deeply ceremonial, whether their circular form represented unity with the earth or simply happened to be the most efficient way to stand up against the wind. Maybe both are true. You can't have survival without meaning after all. The fire burns low, and one of the men shifts a stick, sending a puff of sparks dancing upward. He grins at you, his cheeks reflecting orange light, and gestures toward the flap at the top. "Smoke goes out," he says simply. "Warmth stays in." You nod, pretending to understand the invisible science in that sentence. But it's more than physics. It's intuition honed by centuries of watching the sky and listening to the ground. You think of your own modern house with its thermostat and insulation and realize it's the same principle, only far less poetic. The firelight flickers on the hide walls, and you notice faint drawings, thin lines of ochre and charcoal tracing animals, spirals and stars. One shape repeats, a long-haired figure holding fire in both hands. You ask quietly who it is, and a child beside you whispers, "The one who brought warmth." She says it like it's a fact, like you might say, "Gravity keeps us down." You smile at her certainty. Outside, a gust hits the tent hard enough to make it sway, but no one flinches. The hides flex, the poles hold. The old woman murmurs a few words, half lullaby, half reminder. You lie back on a mat lined with woven grass and fur, your head near the base of the hide wall. The ground is cold beneath, but not biting. Someone's dug a shallow pit there, filled with pine needles and dry moss to insulate it. You think about how that small detail might be the difference between comfort and frostbite. Above you, smoke drifts upward in lazy spirals, finding its path to the vent like it knows the way by heart. Your mind drifts with it, imagining the first humans who crossed into this vast land thousands of winters ago. They didn't have blueprints or manuals, just patience, observation, and memory. There's a theory, somewhat controversial, that certain tribes deliberately built their tents to sing in the wind, letting the tension of the hide vibrate at low frequencies that kept snow from piling too thickly. No one's sure if it's true, but listening now, you swear you can hear a hum, subtle as a breath. The night deepens. Someone stirs the coals, and a few sparks rise, tracing orange threads into the darkness. The warmth feels alive, pulsing with every exhale. You realize how thin the barrier is. Just a few layers of hide between you and a world that wants to freeze you solid. Yet inside this circle of light, you're safe. It's humbling. It's a little absurd. It's beautiful. You catch yourself smiling as the child beside you drifts off, her small hand still clutching a scrap of fur. Outside, wolves yip faintly, their cries carrying across the plains like flute notes. Inside, the fire answers with a crackle, and the old woman whispers a blessing that sounds like the wind's own language. Sleep comes easy, though the cold still bites at your nose. You think about how they must have done this every single night for months, tending fire, patching hides, drying meat, laughing softly into the dark. No heated mattress pads, no double glazing, just knowledge, trust, and an intimacy with nature you've probably never known. You let that thought settle over you like a second robe. The wind calms a little, as if the earth itself is taking a breath. You close your eyes. Somewhere between fire and frost, you finally understand. Survival isn't just about warmth, it's about belonging. The tent, the people, the fire, the song, they're all one thing, a living heartbeat beneath the frozen sky. You wake before dawn, your face still warm from the coals, your breath turning silver in the thin air. The camp is quiet, except for the muffled snort of a horse somewhere beyond the tent circle, and the faint hiss of ash shifting in the fire pit. You crawl toward the center, draw back a flap of hide, and watch a thin ribbon of smoke thread its way through the teepee's top vent into the slate-colored morning. The air outside is bitter, the kind that stings your lungs, but inside, it's tender, alive, balanced on the knife's edge between fire and frost. You notice now how the fire isn't raging. It's low, purposeful, almost whispering. This isn't about blazing heat. It's about breathing warmth. The hearth sits slightly below ground level, a shallow depression surrounded by stones darkened from years of flame. That pit isn't random. It's the heart of the structure. The people who built it understood that heat behaves like a living thing. It needs to move, not suffocate. The teepee's shape pulls the warmth upward, then down again in slow, invisible spirals. You realize the entire shelter is built around this single glowing idea, that survival is a choreography between air, hide, and flame. You stretch out your hands toward the fire and see the glow reflected in the dark eyes of a boy across from you. He's feeding thin willow twigs into the coals, one by one, as if he's afraid to wake the others. The wood gives a sharp little crack. A spark jumps, and the boy grins. He tells you the fire is alive, and he means it literally. Every tippy's flame, he says, has its own personality. Some hiss, some hum. Some are lazy and need coaxing, while others chatter like gossiping relatives. You smile, because you can almost hear the one before you humming softly, steady and proud, as if pleased to be understood. The old woman from last night stirs awake, wrapped in her robe, her voice rough as gravel, yet soft as fur. She leans over the fire, blows gently, and the coals flare obediently. She sprinkles crushed bark onto them. Cottonwood, you think, judging by the scent, and suddenly the air turns rich and earthy, the smoke coiling in dark ribbons that twine up through the vent. The mixture smells sweet, like something between incense and burned sugar. You learn that certain tribes use particular woods, not only for heat, but for the texture of the smoke itself, believing each kind carried different spirits. Some even claim the smoke's shape could tell you how the weather would shift before sunrise. You glance up and see it swirling fast toward the opening, as if racing to outrun the storm. that might still be brewing beyond the horizon. When the first light seeps into the tent, it paints everything in soft copper. The poles gleam faintly, and for the first time you notice their precision. Every pole meets at the top, like fingers clasped in prayer. The fire's column of smoke rising perfectly through their joined grip. There's geometry here, even if no one calls it that. Ratios and angles passed from mother to daughter, father to son. Centuries of experimentation burned into instinct. You remember reading somewhere that an early European trader once marveled that smoke rarely filled a teepee, despite there being no chimney. And he wrote in disbelief that these wild people had mastered the wind better than the scholars of London. You laugh under your breath. He wasn't wrong. The boy beside you is now feeding something different into the fire, small clumps of dry buffalo dung. It sizzles faintly, then burns with a clean, steady flame. You raise an eyebrow and he grins. Hotter than wood, he says. You don't doubt him. Out here, trees are a luxury. Buffalo are everything. Their meat feeds, their hides shelter, their bones shape tools. And yes, their dung heats the night. You wonder how many thousands of frozen nights have been softened by that quiet, unassuming fuel. The smell isn't bad either, just earthy, a little sweet. You make a mental note not to laugh next time someone talks about green energy. As you sit there, the warmth seeps deeper, not just into your skin, but into your thoughts. The fire's rhythm becomes your heartbeat. It's strange how quickly your modern instincts fade here, how fast you stop craving electric lights or thermostats. There's a part of you, primal and unhurried, that knows exactly how to sit by a flame and let it breathe for you. You feel it stirring in your chest, older than any language you know. Outside, dawn bleeds into gold. You can hear soft footsteps crunching snow as people begin to stir, their laughter low and lazy, like smoke turned to sound. Someone outside sings a line of melody that wavers like a thread, half lullaby, half prayer. The boy joins in under his breath, the tone rising and falling with each flicker of the fire. You close your eyes and imagine the hundreds of mornings just like this one, stretching back for centuries. There's an ongoing debate among anthropologists, you recall faintly, about whether the central hearth in these dwellings held purely practical significance, or whether it represented a spiritual axis, the line connecting sky, earth and underworld. Some argue it was both, warmth for the body, alignment for the soul. Watching the way everyone treats the fire, with affection, respect, humor, you can see why no one's certain where physics ends and faith begins. The old woman begins to prepare breakfast, bits of dried meat warmed in a pot of broth, steam curling through the chill. You sip when offered, and it's the richest thing you've ever tasted, salty and smoky with the faint tang of pine. The bowl warms your fingers. Someone cracks a joke about how city people need whole kitchens to do what they do with a single flame. You laugh, not defensively but in awe. Then something curious happens. A man stoops and scoops a small handful of ash from the edge of the pit, blowing on it gently before rubbing it onto the inside of the tent's lower hide. You tilt your head, puzzled. He explains, "It keeps the surface dry and repels insects." You didn't expect that. Who knew ash, the ghost of yesterday's warmth, could protect today's shelter? There's poetry in that. Maybe necessity really is the mother of beauty. As the sun climbs, the teepee brightens from within, the hides glowing amber like a giant lantern. The warmth feels delicate now, like a promise the day might keep if you treat it gently. The boy pokes at the embers one last time, then lets them rest. The fire's alive, but sleeping. It will wake again tonight, loyal as breath. You crawl out into the morning, and the cold slaps you in the face like a friendly rival. Behind you, smoke trails lazily from the tent tops, drifting upward into the pale blue. The camp looks like it's exhaling after a long dream. For the first time, you understand that fire isn't just a tool here. It's a heartbeat shared among dozens of souls, each flame a pulse in a living network of warmth and trust. You pull your robe tighter, glance back once at the glowing circle behind you, and smile. The wind can scream all at once. Inside those tents, fire has already won. The sun has barely lifted, and already the wind is talking again. You feel it slide across the open prairie, cold as a blade, carrying the scent of snow and distant wood smoke. You pull your robe tighter and look out over the camp. From above, if you could rise like a hawk, you'd see perfect geometry. Teepees arranged in a wide circle, all facing east. It's not coincidence, it's design. Each tent is a heartbeat in the same body, each entrance turned toward the dawn, so the first light of morning sweeps evenly across the camp. You start to realize that warmth here isn't just fire, it's organization. You walk between the rows, snow crunching beneath your boots. The people have placed their shelters with precision, not too close to trap smoke, not too far to lose warmth. Children dart through the spaces between them, laughing, their breath silver ribbons in the air. A few dogs follow, tails wagging, noses dusted white. The circle feels alive, like it knows something about surviving the impossible. Near the center, smoke rises in thin columns, steady and unhurried. Each one finds its way upward through the tip of a lodge, joining the pale morning sky. You remember what someone told you last night. The camp is a living organism. The fire is its heartbeat. The tents its ribs. The people its blood. The circle itself, well, that's the skin holding it all together. You can almost feel that truth under your feet. A man waves you over to where he's securing a rope of sinew around a lodgepole. He gestures for you to hold the other end. The hide stretches tight, humming faintly under tension. He grins and says, "If it sings, it's strong." You listen, and sure enough, there's a low note, like a drum, beneath your fingers. He steps back, squinting at the sky. The tents around him form a pattern that seems both random and precise. Each one positioned so that when the wind blows hardest, it flows around the circle, not through it. The man nods toward the hills. We learned from the wind, it doesn't like straight lines. You can't help smiling at that. In cities, you think, everything's about straight lines, walls, streets, angles. Here, the only line that matters is the curve that keeps you alive. Historians often note that Plains tribes arrange their camps with entrances facing east, not only for sunlight but for spiritual reasons. Dawn was renewal, the daily proof that warmth would come again. Yet there's debate among scholars about whether this alignment began as faith or physics. Did the ritual follow the need, or did the need grow from the ritual? You look at the circle, the fire, the snow-dusted hides, and realize maybe it doesn't matter. Faith and function are braided like rope here. You wander outward, toward the edge of the encampment, where the wind is stronger. The teepees on the outer ring are slightly larger, their hides thicker. One of the men standing there tells you this is no accident. These belong to the hunters and guards. Their tents form a buffer, shielding the smaller lodges within. The idea isn't to block the wind completely, but to break it, make it stumble before it reaches the children and elders. You crouch to feel the ground near one of these windward tents. The snow's packed higher along the base, forming a ridge that deflects air upward. You realize the snowdrift isn't a nuisance, it's armor. Nearby, a young woman laughs as she ties a string of dried fish to a tripod. Her hair whips in the wind, and she looks up long enough to say, "This is how we tell the weather. If it freezes hard before noon, we move tomorrow." You ask how she decides where to go next, and she shrugs. "The wind tells us." You believe her. You can feel it too, pushing, persuading. These people don't fight the elements. They dance with them. As the morning brightens, you step back and watch the smoke trails twist in the air, each one slanting the same way. Together, they form a great invisible fan, a natural compass that tells you exactly where the wind is coming from. You realize that just by glancing at the camp from a distance, anyone here could read the weather, maybe even the mood of the day. It's a language you've never known, yet your skin starts to learn its syllables. You kneel beside one of the elders mending a tear in his teepee's lower edge. His fingers are quick despite the cold, stitching hide with bone needle and sinew thread. He tells you they sometimes smear the stitches with a paste made from animal fat and crushed ash to make them waterproof. You raise your eyebrows and he chuckles, proud. "Keeps the snow from biting through," he says. You imagine generations learning this through small mistakes, through nights when one bad seam meant waking to ice on your blanket. The dogs wander closer, curling up against the tent bases where the wind is weakest. You scratch one behind the ear and it leans into you, eyes half closed. You realize these animals are part of the thermal design too, a living fringe of warmth around the camp's perimeter. One shakes itself and trots toward the center, tail high, scattering frost like sparks. The old man finishes his stitching, ties a final knot, and sits back with a sigh. "Now she'll hold another storm," he says, tapping the hide with his needle. He looks around the circle and adds quietly, "Everything strong is round." You think about that. How even modern architecture has only recently rediscovered what these nomads knew intuitively. Circles resist wind, distribute pressure, conserve heat. Maybe wisdom really does move in spirals. A few children are building a smaller ring nearby with sticks. mimicking their parents' tents. They giggle as one of them crouches in the center, pretending to tend a tiny fire. You watch the wind catch their hair, their laughter echoing off the hides. The miniature circle wobbles but stands. Somehow that feels like a promise. By midday, the camp is alive again. Women are scraping hides, men carving arrow shafts, and from somewhere, the sound of a drum begins. A slow, heartbeat rhythm that threads through everything. You realize that even this sound, this rhythm, has a function. It gathers everyone's pace, keeps time, maybe even reminds them that life goes on despite the cold. You close your eyes and feel it vibrate faintly in your chest. Later, as the light fades and long shadows stretch from the poles, you climb a small rise and look back. The circle glows faintly, each lodge a flickering ember in the snow. Smoke drifts upward, twisting into the fading blue, as though the entire camp is whispering a single breath to the sky. The wind rushes past your ears, but it can't touch the warmth pulsing in that ring of light. You stand there for a long moment, feeling the paradox settle in your bones. Survival here isn't about fighting nature. It's about learning her rhythm. You turn toward the circle, toward the faint laughter, the dancing embers, and you understand something deep and old. That warmth isn't just made, it's shared. The wind has softened by evening, curling low around the camp like an animal finally tamed. You're back inside one of the lodges, sitting cross-legged beside a half-sleeping fire. The light flickers along the curved walls, making the hides seem to ripple as though they're breathing. The warmth here feels different now. Denser, deeper, layered like a story retold through generations. You shift on your mat and realize there's no single surface beneath you, but a carefully built sandwich of textures. Reeds, grass, fur, and skin. Every layer has a reason. Nothing here is guesswork. The woman across from you is smoothing down a bear pelt with her palm, the fur catching sparks of orange light. It's not the fire that keeps you alive, she says, not looking up. It's what you sleep on. You test her words with your body, pressing your palm into the bedding. Beneath the top fur layer, you feel dried reeds, flexible but springy. And under those, a mat of woven willow bark that rustles softly. It's all engineered to trap pockets of air. The same trick used in down jackets centuries later. You smile to yourself. They were engineers in moccasins. She laughs at your curiosity and lifts one corner of the mat. Between two layers, she's tucked a scatter of feathers. You blink, surprised. Geese, she says. They fly south but leave their warmth behind. The thought makes you grin. It's almost poetic. She shrugs, modest about the ingenuity her people perfected long before insulation was a word. You lean back and glance toward the fire. It's low now, embers smoldering more than burning, and you realize that's deliberate too. Heat rises slowly through the tent, caught first by the mats, then by the hides, then by the cold air that presses against the outer surface. The warmth doesn't race. It lingers, lazy and loyal. Someone once told you that the Lakota and Cheyenne believed that fire, if kept at the right strength, learned your rhythm, that it would breathe with you through the night. You wonder if there's truth in that. You pull a second robe over your shoulders, noticing its pattern, tiny triangles painted in red and black. Each one seems random, yet when the fire flares, they align like stars. The woman catches your gaze and explains that each design marks a family, a memory. Every hide tells a story. Some are painted with hunts, others with weather or dreams. You trace one small mark near the edge and realize it's shaped like a snowflake. That one's mine, she says softly. The year the river froze so hard we walked across it with the horses. Her voice has that faraway warmth of a memory that still glows from the inside. You shift closer to the fire, careful not to disturb the carefully layered bedding. The scent of smoke mixes with fur and something faintly sweet. Tallow, maybe. The air hums faintly with the sound of breathing. The lodge holds its people like a cupped hand. It's strange, you think, how cozy something can feel when it's built out of death. Skins, bones, ashes. And yet somehow it sings with life. A boy enters, dragging a bundle of hides behind him. He flops them onto the ground, grinning. They're thick winter bison robes, the inner sides soft as velvet. He gestures for you to feel one, and when you do, it's almost shockingly warm, even cold. He flips it fur side down and lays another one over it, fur side up, explaining that when two hides face each other like that, they trap the body's heat perfectly. It's simple science, hidden in instinct. He flops onto the pile and rolls himself up like a burrito, peeking out with a grin. "You won't freeze if you sleep like a bison," he says, muffled by the fur. You laugh, and the woman shakes her head but smiles too. The boy's trick is old. So old, it's practically genetic. Outside, the wind starts to pick up again, brushing the tent walls with icy fingers. You can hear it trying to find a weakness, but the layers hold firm. You notice how the hides overlap near the base, pegged with sharpened sticks. Any gap that might invite a draft has been sealed with moss and mud. It's ugly, maybe, but effective. Even now, centuries later, you doubt any modern camper could do better with their factory-sealed zippers and foil blankets. As the night deepens, conversation slows. The woman hums a tune under her breath, low and rhythmic. It's a lullaby, but also a kind of inventory, each verse naming something that keeps the cold away. Fire, fur, family, stars. You start to hum along without realizing it. The melody curls around you like one more layer. Historians still argue whether the practice of layering hides and mats came purely from practical need or whether it carried ceremonial significance, whether each material, from the reeds to the furs, symbolized the balance between earth, animal, and human. Some believe each layer was a quiet offering, a reminder that survival required gratitude. Others claim it was just good craftsmanship. But lying here, feeling how the warmth rises through the woven floor and curls around your toes, you think maybe gratitude and craftsmanship were the same thing. You notice one more detail before sleep claims you. Hanging above your head, tied to a thin cord, is a pouch of herbs. Sage, cedar, and something sharper you can't name. It sways gently in the warm air. You ask what it's for, and the woman murmurs, "Dreams." Then she adds, almost teasing, "And to keep you from snoring." You both laugh quietly, the kind of laughter that feels like a secret shared in the dark. The fire sighs and lowers itself again. You slip under the double hides, the warmth immediate and enveloping, the scents familiar now, smoke, fur, pine. The layers beneath cradle you, resilient and forgiving. You can hear the wind still pacing outside, frustrated, unable to touch you. Your eyes grow heavy. You imagine the thousands of nights like this, whole generations breathing in sync beneath hides and stars. You think about the future, about electric blankets and heaters, and realize how sterile they seem compared to this. The raw, handmade intimacy of survival. Here, every layer tells you that you belong to the earth, and she, for once, is holding you gently. As sleep pulls you under, the last thing you hear is the woman's voice, soft as the fur around you. "Sleep deep, little traveler. Tomorrow, the fire will wake before you do." You wake to the sound of the wind whistling a thin, lonely song through the plains. It slides under the edge of the world and brushes against your cheeks, as if testing whether you're awake. The tent walls shiver softly, the air inside still holding the sleepy breath of night. The fire has faded to a nest of red embers, and for a moment you can see your breath mixing with the smoke, curling upward in lazy grey ribbons. You stretch beneath the hides, reluctant to let the warmth go. Outside, the sky has turned pale blue and sharp as ice. You crawl toward the flap, lift it slightly, and peer out. The horizon looks endless. A sheet of snow untouched, except for faint trails leading away from camp. The wind rushes past your face, clean, dry, and bitterly cold. Yet when you close the flap again, you realize something. Despite the small cracks and seams, the inside doesn't feel frozen. It breathes. The warmth hasn't escaped completely. It lingers like a memory, soft around the edges. You start to notice the rhythm of air, how it moves in and out through the top vent, through tiny openings near the ground. It's not accidental. It's alive like lungs. A man squats by the hearth, stirring the coals with a stick. His hair is dusted with frost, but his expression is calm, almost amused. "The tent breathes," he says, as though reading your thoughts. You breathe with it. If it stops, so do you. He fans the embers gently, and the fire answers with a low, eager hum. The smoke rises, slides along the inside of the cone, and escapes cleanly through the top vent. You watch the air currents like they're visible threads, heat rising, cold descending, weaving together in a quiet, invisible dance. You've always thought warmth meant sealing yourself away, shutting out the world. But here, warmth comes from balance, from letting the cold in just enough to keep the air alive. You can feel it. The gentle tug of pressure at your skin, the faint stir of movement even when you sit still. The man gestures for you to stand by the tent wall. Hold your hand here, he says. You do, and the hide feels cool but dry, not wet or brittle. Too tight and the fire chokes, he continues. Too loose, and the snow walks in. It's the oldest kind of engineering, born from patience, not blueprints. You ask how they manage it when storms come, when the wind howls like it wants to tear everything apart. He grins and points upward. We talk to the smoke. You blink, not sure you heard right. He laughs softly. We change the vent, he explains. When the wind shifts, so does the opening. You must let it find its way. You look up at the circular flap at the top, where two poles cross. It's covered by a thin hide that can be angled, opened, or closed. The entire system is responsive, like a living creature adjusting its breath to the weather. You find yourself marveling again at how simplicity hides brilliance. A child crawls out from under a heap of robes, hair wild from sleep. She toddles over to the flap and peeks out, then turns to you. Too windy, she declares, pulling it shut halfway. The man nods approvingly. She knows already. You smile, thinking how modern houses take decades of study to ventilate properly. Yet this little girl, not even 6, understands airflow by feel. There's a faint smell of juniper as someone adds fresh twigs to the fire. The smoke sharpens, bright and resinous. The woman who'd layered the bedding last night enters, her face half lit by dawn. She sits near the hearth and adjusts a small opening at the base of the wall, using a flat piece of wood. For the fire to eat, she murmurs. You crouch beside her and see what she means. An air vent carved into the snowpack just beneath the hides. It's small but crucial, feeding oxygen to the fire's heart. Without it, the flame would smother in its own breath. She gestures for you to feel the draft. It's subtle, a whisper against your fingertips. You realize it's perfectly balanced. The air that enters here feeds the fire. The air that rises escapes through the top, and what's left is calm warmth that hovers at chest level. You sit back, quietly awed. In your world, airflow is measured in cubic meters per second. Here it's measured by instinct and song. A thought crosses your mind. Didn't some early explorers claim that native lodges were smoke-choked and primitive? You almost laugh. They must have been standing in the wrong place, or maybe they didn't stay long enough to notice the rhythm. Scholars still debate whether the precise venting design of teepees evolved through deliberate experimentation, or if it emerged gradually through communal adaptation. Centuries of trial, error, and inherited habit. Either way, the result is flawless. You can't improve on it with a thermostat. Outside, a gust slaps the tent, making the poles creak. You can hear the air rush around the structure, then smooth out like a wave curling and receding. The hides flex just enough to absorb the shock. Inside, the flame flickers once, then steadies. The sound of the wind becomes a kind of heartbeat, rhythmic, predictable. The people inside don't even glance up. The man stands and lifts the hide flap again, letting a stripe of daylight fall across the interior. He nods to the fire. See how it clears the smoke, he says. You watch as the pale stream of air funnels upward, catching the grey plume and sweeping it toward the vent. The interior brightens, the air clears. You breathe deeply and find it fresh, not smoky, not stagnant. It smells faintly of pine and warmth. The child curls beside the fire, tracing circles in the ash with a stick. Her lines spiral outward, intersecting and crossing like the wind currents above her head. You smile at the unintentional poetry. The woman hands you a bowl of hot broth. It steams gently, the scent earthy and sweet. You sip, and it warms you from the inside, filling the same quiet rhythm as the air around you. Later, when the wind eases, you step outside. The camp hums softly, smoke trailing upward from each lodge in near-perfect vertical columns. No smog, no haze, just pure breath against a sky the color of glass. You tilt your head, watching the patterns, and it hits you. This isn't just architecture, it's harmony between people and wind, between heat and cold. Each breath of the tent mirrors the breath of its sleepers, every exhale rising toward the heavens. You pull your robe closer and glance once more at the circle behind you. The hides flutter gently in the breeze, alive and whispering. You feel the cold nibble at your ears but smile anyway, knowing the secret now. The tents never fought the cold. They befriended it. The snow falls that night without sound, each flake so light it seems to float forever before landing. The world outside is gone, just a blankness stretching in every direction. Inside the lodge, the fire glows low and red, the air warm and thick with the scent of pine smoke and tallow. You pull your robe closer, toes tucked beneath layers of fur. The woman beside you stirs the coals, her face reflected in their dull light like an ember itself. "When it's this cold," she says softly, "we sleep with the stones." You blink, unsure what she means, until she gestures toward a flat slab resting near the edge of the fire. Its surface glows faintly, heat shimmering off it. A young man reaches for it with tongs made from bone, lifting it carefully. He wraps it in a scrap of hide and slides it beneath the bedding. A few moments later, a faint warmth spreads outward like ripples in a pond. "The earth remembers the fire," she murmurs. "We borrow that memory." You touch the ground near your side and feel it. Gentle, even heat radiating upward through the mats and hides. It's almost miraculous. The man grins when he sees your surprise. "You thought we just burned wood and prayed," he says. "No, we cooked the stones too." The phrase makes you laugh, but there's reverence in his tone. Each rock is chosen carefully, dense river stones that won't crack when heated. The tribe keeps a cache of them buried near the fire pit, reused night after night, some passed down through families like heirlooms. You imagine generations of hands lifting those same stones, tending the same warmth. The air feels different now, softer, heavier with comfort. A child curls up beside you, half asleep, her hand resting on one of the warm spots. You can hear her breath, steady and small. Someone adds another layer of hide over her and smiles. You realize this ritual isn't just practical, it's tender, almost sacred. The warmth doesn't just protect the body, it gathers the heart. There's a faint hiss as snow hits the top of the lodge and melts instantly. You glance upward, wondering how the roof doesn't catch fire or leak. The old man sitting across the fire notices your curiosity. "The fire knows where to stop," he says, then chuckles. "But we help it remember." He leans forward, taking a pinch of ash from the hearth and sprinkling it in a circle around the flames. The ash dulls the fire's edges, creating a buffer between wood and earth. It's not just superstition, it's insulation and control. He tells you they sometimes spread ash beneath sleeping mats too, believing it keeps away cold spirits. Maybe it's coincidence, but you swear it feels warmer afterward. Historians still argue whether these heated stone systems were common across all tribes, or limited to regions where winters were fiercest. Some archaeological digs have found hearth circles buried deep beneath old lodge sites, suggesting people built their sleeping floors directly over layers of reused coals. Others claim that's an accident of erosion, that no one would dare sleep above live embers. But as you feel the mellow, living heat beneath your mat, it's hard not to believe in design. The fire doesn't rage. It hums quietly beneath you, a gentle heart still beating long after the flames have faded. The young man tosses a handful of snow onto the fire, and for a moment it hisses and spits. Steam billows upward, glowing silver in the lamplight. "The fire must drink too," he jokes, and everyone laughs. The smell of wet smoke fills the space, earthy and pure. You watch how easily these people handle danger, how they treat fire not as a threat, but as a companion who needs care. Every movement around it is practiced, respectful. The woman unwraps another stone, this one small enough to hold. She presses it into your hands, and you almost drop it from the shock of heat. It radiates warmth that feels alive, steady and deep. "Keep it," she says. "It will last till morning." You hold it close to your chest, and the warmth seeps straight through your robe. You think about electric heating pads, metal radiators, the hum of machines, and realize none of them feel this alive. As the night deepens, conversation fades into the crackle of the fire and the occasional sigh of wind. Someone hums a low tune, maybe a lullaby, maybe a prayer. You close your eyes, feeling the heat beneath you, around you, inside you. The warmth becomes rhythm, your breath sinking with the coals, the faint pulse of the earth beneath the tent floor. You wake sometime later to a new sound, a quiet scraping. The old man is near the fire pit, shifting the stones with a stick. He glances at you and smiles. "Checking their heart," he says. "Too cold and they sleep too long. Too hot and they burn the ground." You watch him adjust them with patient care, as though tending old friends. When he's finished, he points toward the vent above. The snow outside has thickened, muting the world, but the smoke still finds its path, twisting upward. "The stones help the air," he explains. "Warm air rises, pulls the breath through. Even the wind outside listens to them." You marvel again at the harmony, the way earth, air, fire, and human will work together in this fragile space. The boy who'd rolled himself in fur last night stirs awake and pokes his head out. "Hot rocks are lazy tonight," he mumbles. Everyone chuckles softly. The woman tosses a small piece of resin into the fire and it releases a sweet, piney aroma. Now they'll wake, she says. The smoke thickens, curling around the edges of the lodge before slipping out through the vent like a sigh. A thought crosses your mind, half dream, half wonder. Maybe that's why this place feels so calm. The people here don't fight the cold. They speak to it in the language of warmth, stone, and patience. You imagine yourself hundreds of years ago, a traveler stumbling upon a camp glowing faintly under a frozen sky, thinking it must be magic to survive the night. And maybe it is. But it's a magic made of observation, repetition, and faith in the ordinary. You lie back down, clutching the warm stone to your chest. The heat is steady, the sound of the wind muted to a whisper. Beneath you, the earth hums softly, its heartbeat borrowed by the people who learned long ago how to listen. The fire breathes, the tent exhales. You close your eyes, letting both carry you somewhere between dream and memory. The next evening comes wrapped in snow clouds so thick they swallow the horizon. The world outside has turned to muted silver, and inside the lodge, the light of the fire flickers against hides that glow like bronze. Dinner is done. The smell of roasted meat and pine smoke lingers in the air, and people begin to gather close to the fire pit, forming a loose circle. You can feel it immediately, the shift in mood. Work is over. Survival is secured for another day, and now it's time for something older than either. Stories. The old woman, the one whose laugh sounds like dry grass rustling, sits near the fire, her eyes bright and sharp. She tosses a handful of sage onto the coals, and the air fills with sweet smoke. It curls up and wraps the tent's peak in a shimmering veil. Someone dims the vent slightly, and suddenly the space feels smaller, closer, as if the world itself is leaning in to listen. She begins without warning, her voice low and unhurried, each word heavy with rhythm. You can't understand every phrase. Her language rolls like wind through leaves, but you feel the meaning in your bones. It's a story of the first winter, when the world was still learning how to be cold. The animals and people were the same then, she says, all with voices, all afraid of the dark. The fire, newly born, wandered between them, unsure whom to stay with. Finally, the people offered it breath. They sang to it, and it chose to live with them. You smile, realizing that in her story, warmth itself is a friendship, not a possession. Around you, others nod and murmur, some finishing her sentences softly, as though joining an old song. Children curl against their parents, half listening, half dreaming. The firelight dances across their faces, the glow catching on beads and braids, and for a moment, you think the entire lodge is breathing to the same tempo. Someone hands you a small gourd rattle filled with pebbles, gesturing for you to shake it when the rhythm calls. You hesitate, then try, and laughter ripples through the group as your timing falters. It's not about the beat, the old woman teases. It's about the breath between beats. You try again, softer this time, and somehow the sound fits. The rattle joins the whisper of fire and the murmur of voices until you can't tell where one ends and the other begins. A young man with a drum begins to play, a slow, steady pulse that sounds like a heartbeat muffled by snow. The song that follows is neither happy nor sad, but something in between, a song about endurance. It speaks of the night sky as a blanket, of stars as eyes watching kindly over the sleepers. You find yourself swaying, the rhythm sneaking into your muscles. The woman beside you leans close and whispers that winter songs are medicine. They remind the body it's alive, keep fear from sinking too deep. She says that once, long ago, a storyteller's voice could heal frostbite or stop a storm. You raise an eyebrow and she grins. You think stories can't warm a body? She asks. Then why are you sweating? You laugh, realizing she's right. The air inside the lodge has turned almost tropical, thick with heat and breath. There's a moment of silence when the song ends, broken only by the pop of sap in the fire. Outside, the wind claws at the hide, but no one flinches. The old woman leans forward, poking the embers with a stick. You hear that? She asks. That's the cold knocking. It doesn't know how to sing. The others chuckle softly, and she goes on. When you can't fight it, you outlast it with stories. You glance around and realize this nightly ritual is more than entertainment. It's insulation. The laughter, the songs, the shared breathing, it all thickens the air, makes it feel heavier, warmer. Every word adds a layer between the people and the cold. Every story a thread in the fabric of survival. You remember reading once that early traders described nights in winter lodges as filled with song from dusk till dawn. Some thought it was superstition, others social bonding, but maybe it was both, science by accident, or perhaps belief so precise it became science. The fire flares as the old woman throws a handful of powdered something into it, crushed cedar maybe, or dried berries. It sparks blue for a moment, dazzling against the darkness. A child gasps, delighted. The storyteller smiles. The fire likes to dance, she says, but only when we give it a reason. You can't help grinning at that, the idea that even flames need applause. Outside, a wolf howls, long and low. The drum answers once, softly, almost respectfully. The wind follows, brushing against the lodge like a sigh. Inside, no one seems afraid. The boy from before whispers. The wolves sing too. You nod, realizing that here, even the coldest sound is still part of the same conversation. When the laughter fades and people begin to settle for sleep, the air feels thick with comfort. You stretch out near the fire, the heat brushing your face like a gentle hand. The stories still hum in your ears, fragments floating through your thoughts. The wandering fire, the singing stars, the cold that couldn't learn to make music. You realize that this is how they survived, not only with hides and fire, but with voice. There's debate among modern scholars about whether oral traditions like these served mainly to pass down survival knowledge, like how to build shelters, track animals, or read weather, or if their true purpose was spiritual, keeping communities bonded against the vastness of nature. Listening now, feeling warmth in your bones and laughter still echoing in your chest, you think the question misses the point. Here, story and survival are the same. The tale of fire is the keeping of fire. The old woman's voice drifts through the dim air one last time. Remember, she murmurs, eyes closed. The cold isn't the enemy. It's just the world asking if you're paying attention. Her words fade into the hush that follows. The fire pops once like punctuation, and then the lodge goes still. You lie there, feeling the soft rhythm of breath around you, dozens of lives synced to the same pulse. Outside, the storm gathers its voice again, but inside, you're wrapped in something stronger than heat. You close your eyes, and the stories linger behind them, glowing like coals that refuse to die. By the next morning, the snow has stopped. The plains glitter under a pale sun, each drift shining like crushed glass. You step outside and squint, breath hanging in the air like smoke. The cold hits hard, sharper after the fire's embrace. Every sound, footsteps, laughter, even the snort of a horse, seems to echo farther in the frozen stillness. Behind you, the tents shimmer faintly, their hides glowing with light. You think of them now not as shelters but as living creatures, breathing in rhythm with the people inside. As you turn, the old hunter from last night waves you over. He's kneeling beside a stretched buffalo hide, the size of a small room, pegged to the snow with carved bones. He's scraping the flesh side with a stone blade, rhythmic, deliberate. The sound, soft and steady, fills the air like the heartbeat of the morning. You watch as curls of white fat fall away, and he glances up. This, he says, is our wall against death. The buffalo hide gleams where he's cleaned it. A warm tan color even in the cold light. You crouch beside him, watching as he runs his fingers along the grain. If it's too thin, he says, the wind will bite through it. If it's too thick, it won't breathe. The hide must remember the buffalo. It must move like it's still alive. The words catch something in you. You touch the edge carefully, and it's supple, almost warm to the touch. He points to another hide lying beside it, this one marked with tiny cuts in the edges. For sewing, he explains. We lace them together with sinew, same as the ribs of the animal. His tone turns softer. Everything that lives helps everything else live, even after it dies. You realize that this isn't just craftsmanship, it's philosophy. Life here is circular, stitched together from what remains. The fire crackles nearby where another woman softens hide strips in smoke. The air smells thick and rich, a mix of pine and animal oil. You ask how they waterproof the hides, and she grins. Tallow and brains, she says. You blink. Brains? She laughs, her eyes bright. Every animal has enough brains to tan its own skin. Nature gives you what you need. You can't tell if she's joking, but she says it with such authority, you decide not to question it. As she works, you notice the texture of the hide change. It goes from dull to gleaming, almost luminous. When she stretches it taut, the surface catches the sunlight like polished copper. This one's from the great hunt before the river froze, she says. He fed us all through the cold moon. Her hand lingers on the hide. Tender, like touching an old friend, you stand there, watching, and think about how every teepee in the camp carries this memory. The buffalo itself woven into every inch. The skin becomes structure, warmth, spirit. You recall reading once that the Plains tribes followed the great herds not only for food but for shelter. One buffalo could clothe a family, roof their home, and wrap their newborn. There's an intimacy in that dependence, a quiet reverence that no factory-made fabric could ever hold. The old hunter gestures toward the hides drying in the cold air. We hang them in the wind before sewing, he says. The cold makes them strong. If they tear now, they'll tear later. You watch as the breeze ripples through them, turning each sheet into a flag of survival. He leans closer and adds, almost whispering, the buffalo spirit doesn't like weakness. Later, when the hides are ready, several people gather to stretch them over the lodge poles. The process is slow and graceful, like a dance. The hides overlap in spirals, their seams sealed with sinew and grease. As they tighten the ropes, the tent takes shape, breathing outward, its peak rising like a crown against the sky. You can see how each section was planned, how no edge is wasted. When it's done, the lodge stands proud, golden in the sun, steaming slightly from the warmth inside. You ask if buffalo hides were always used. An elder nearby shakes his head. Long ago, before there were so many buffalo, some used elk, some deer. But the buffalo made it perfect. He pauses, eyes narrowing at the horizon. When the herds vanished, so did that perfection. His voice fades into the wind, leaving behind a silence that feels almost sacred. There's a debate, you remember, among historians about how early these hide lodges developed their sophisticated weatherproofing. Some claim the double-layered buffalo coverings, one inside, one outside, were innovations of the late 18th century when winters grew harsher. Others insist they're as old as the camps themselves. Looking at the lodge now, its hides glistening with frost yet warm within, you suspect the answer lies somewhere in between. Refinement born from centuries of listening to wind and animal alike. As the sun dips lower, the new hide tent glows from within, firelight bleeding through the seams like veins of gold. You step closer and run your hand along its surface. The warmth from the inside radiates faintly, proof that this simple structure, hide, pole, grease, breath, defies the logic of cold. The wind brushes against it and slides away, defeated. Before you leave, the woman who had mentioned brains and tallow calls out. She hands you a small scrap of treated hide, soft and smooth as silk. Take it, she says, for luck. The buffalo likes travelers. You tuck it into your coat pocket, its faint scent of smoke following you as you walk. Behind you, the camp hums with quiet satisfaction. The hides ripple in the fading light, alive with memory. Somewhere deep in the distance, a buffalo call echoes across the frozen plain, low and mournful, yet steady. You pause, listening, unsure whether it's real or just the wind playing tricks. Either way, it feels like a blessing. The voice of the very creature whose skin now guards these lives from the cold. You glance back once more. The teepees shimmer under the last orange streaks of sunset, their buffalo skin walls glowing like lanterns. You understand now. Warmth here isn't only built, it's inherited, layer by layer, life by life. The buffalo doesn't just feed the people, it teaches them how to endure. You wake to the sound of creaking poles and distant voices, low, rhythmic, purposeful. The camp is stirring, but not lazily like the morning before. There's movement everywhere. People folding hides, tying bundles, rolling mats tight with ropes of sinew. Horses snort in the cold, stamping frost from the ground. The smell of smoke and grease mingles with something else. Anticipation. It takes a moment before you realize what's happening. They're leaving. The whole village is getting ready to move. You step outside into a dawn pale as bone. The air is sharp enough to sting, but there's energy in it, like the world is waiting for the first footprint. Around you, the circle of lodges has already begun to dissolve. Fires are being doused, poles lowered. What took days to build is coming down in quiet harmony, each person knowing their part. You realize how strange it is that this doesn't feel frantic or desperate. It's graceful, like a living thing shedding its old skin. A young woman walks past with a bundle of poles balanced on her shoulder. The wind turns, she tells you simply. So we go where it's kind. You watch as she ties the poles together into a neat cone and hoists them onto a horse. The animal doesn't flinch. It's done this hundreds of times. In fact, many of the horses here are trained for it. They're part of what makes this way of life possible. The poles will become the frames for new shelters miles away. The hides unrolled and reborn again before nightfall. You follow the procession of work. Every step a quiet miracle of efficiency. The children help, gathering smaller sticks, while the elders direct with nods and gestures. You notice the order. Women taking down the hides, men loading the travois, the sled-like frames that drag across the snow, and teenagers guiding the dogs who pull lighter loads. You'd read once that entire plains tribes could move their camps in under an hour when they needed to, even with dozens of lodges. Watching it now, you believe it. A man laughs when he catches your expression. You can't fight winter, he says. You follow warmth like a shadow. He gestures toward the horizon where the sun lifts weakly above frozen hills. South wind will wake soon. Better to meet it halfway. There's something beautiful in that logic. The idea that mobility itself is insulation. He hands you a rope to tie a bundle, and as you work, you notice the snow beneath the collapsed lodge is dry, not soaked. It never melts. You ask. He shakes his head. The fire dries it each night. When we move, the ground sleeps again. You kneel and touch it. The earth is cold, but not frozen solid. It feels like the warmth has seeped deep, a quiet memory left behind. When the camp is nearly packed, you see a group of women kneeling near what was once the central fire. They scoop a bit of ash into small leather pouches. You tilt your head, curious. One of them looks up and explains, "We carry the old fire to start the new." She ties the pouch at her belt. No camp should begin without memory. You feel a strange lump in your throat at the thought. Every journey carrying a spark of the place before. Every fire a descendant of the last. Soon, the camp is nothing but tracks in the snow and faint smudges of smoke. The first riders move out, their horses decorated with strips of dyed cloth that flutter in the wind. Children ride in travois baskets behind them, bundled in fur, their laughter carrying on the breeze. Dogs trot alongside, tongues out, tails high. You fall into step beside them, and the rhythm of migration seeps into your bones. Crunch, step, breath, the steady pulse of survival. There's debate among historians about just how far these winter migrations went. Some claim tribes moved only a few miles to find shelter among trees or valleys, while others insist they traveled hundreds, following herds or escaping frozen storms. But as you watch this procession snake across the plains, you sense it's not about distance, it's about instinct, the art of reading the land like a map written in wind and frost. The group halts near a rise overlooking a river half locked in ice. Smoke drifts faintly from a distant ridge, perhaps another camp. The leader, an older man with snow in his braids, lifts a hand. "There," he says, "the river's still breathing." You realize he means the current is visible, a sign of life. Water, even half frozen, means warmth below, a place where the earth hasn't given up its heat. Within minutes, poles are being unloaded, hides unfurled. The circle will live again before sundown. As they work, the woman who had carried the ash kneels and pours her pouch into a shallow pit. The tiny grey dust scatters like memory returning home. She strikes flint, and soon a small flame flickers to life. The others gather around it, feeding it with twigs, protecting it from the wind. You realize this isn't just a practical step, it's ceremonial. The first fire of the new camp must come from the old. Continuity is survival here, just as much as movement. The air fills again with the sounds of labor and laughter. Poles rising, hides rustling, horses snorting in the snow. The entire process feels like breathing in reverse. The camp inhaled this morning, exhaled now as something new. You stand back and watch the circle reform, perfect as before. Every tent angled to face the same direction. By twilight, the fires are burning again. The smell of wood and fat fills the air. The old man who'd spoken of the wind sits beside you, passing a piece of dried meat. "The cold doesn't chase us," he says. "We just don't stay still long enough for it to find us." His laugh is deep and contagious, and you can't help joining in. The night settles. The new camp glows softly under the stars, smoke drifting lazily upward, the wind's edge blunted by the rhythm of life. You sit near the fire, thinking about all the movement, the lifting, the folding, the walking, and how it all fits together so perfectly. It's not chaos, it's choreography. A centuries-old dance between people and climate. As the flames crackle low, you find yourself wondering about modern life, how we've built walls thicker, roofs higher, but maybe forgotten how to move with the weather instead of against it. Here, the people don't just survive winter. They negotiate with it. Keep it close, but not too close. You watch a child feed a stick into the fire and whisper something to it. Perhaps a wish, perhaps gratitude. The glow lights her face, and in her small, serious eyes you see something eternal. The understanding that home isn't where you build, but what you carry. That night, the camp settles beside the frozen river. The water glints like glass in the moonlight. Thin mist curling above it, as if the earth is exhaling through a half-closed mouth. You pull your robe tighter and step closer to the nearest lodge, curious about something you noticed earlier. A strange pattern of snow packed neatly along its base. It's piled higher than the rest, not from neglect, but intention. A young woman crouches there, pressing handfuls of powdery snow against the bottom edge of the hide wall. Her breath fogs in front of her face as she works, and every few moments she stops to pat the snow smooth with a flat piece of wood. You ask why she's doing it, and she grins. Because snow keeps us warm. She says it so casually that you almost laugh. Surely she's joking. But she's not. She sees your disbelief and adds, "The snow listens better than the wind." You kneel beside her and feel the packed drift. It's firm, cold, but strangely dense, sealing the small gaps where hide meets earth. She explains that the snow forms a natural wall, keeping out the drafts that creep beneath the tent. It's counterintuitive. You've spent your life thinking snow meant danger, frostbite, frozen lungs. But here it's insulation, a paradox made practical. She gestures toward the firelight flickering through the hide. The snow doesn't melt, she says. It freezes harder. That's how it guards the heat. You remember reading something like this once. How certain Arctic peoples built snow shelters that could trap warmth so well that the inside reached above freezing, even when the outside was 40 below. You hadn't realized that on these plains, far south of the Arctic, the same principle had been used for centuries. You help her pat the snow into place, your gloves crusting white. The air bites your cheeks, but there's satisfaction in the simple rhythm of it. When it's done, she says, we'll sleep without the wind in our ears. The thought feels almost luxurious. Nearby, another group of people are building a wall of snow blocks in a loose semicircle facing the prevailing wind. It's low, no taller than your hip, but solid. You ask one of the men about it, and he nods. A snow blanket for the camp, he says, stops the cold from running wild. His voice is matter of fact, as though he's describing how to tie a knot. You can tell this knowledge isn't new. It's inherited, passed through hands, not books. The wind picks up, blowing powder across the ground. The drifts around the tents ripple like white fur. The woman beside you tightens her scarf. The snow listens, she repeats softly. But it must be told where to sit. You realize that even the harshest elements here aren't enemies. They're collaborators. If you understand their language, when you return inside, the warmth feels different, thicker, steadier. The walls no longer whisper with the hiss of cold air slipping through. The fire burns lower, content, its heat held close by the new snow barrier. You sit down and press your palm against the floor. The cold has dulled, the air still but breathable. Someone laughs, tossing a bit of meat into the fire for luck. Now even the wind has to knock before it enters, he says. There's something oddly elegant about it all. You think of modern homes wrapped in synthetic insulation, plastic films, fiberglass sheets, and yet here, survival has been mastered with what nature gives freely. Air, hide, earth, and snow. You wonder whether future engineers will ever admit how much of their innovation is just rediscovery. As the night deepens, the sound of the storm fades to a distant hum. The fire pops, releasing tiny sparks that die mid-air. A woman hums a tune while stitching a tear in her robe. The child beside her yawns and crawls under a fur blanket. You can feel the stillness of the air. It's not suffocating, but peaceful, like the whole tent is holding its breath. You ask the old man by the fire whether the snow ever backfires, whether it ever melts and floods the floor. He chuckles. Only when people forget to thank it, he says. You grin, unsure if he's teasing, but his eyes twinkle with mischief. Sometimes, he adds, we leave a bit of bread at the door for the snow spirits, keeps them fat and lazy. He winks, and you realize that behind every piece of practical wisdom here, there's a superstition that makes it easier to remember. He leans forward, tossing a stick into the flames. Long ago, he says, some tried to lift the snow away from their lodges, thinking they were making themselves stronger. They froze before morning. The firelight dances across his face as he continues. The snow doesn't trap you, it holds you, same as a mother holds her child. The phrasing sends a quiet warmth through you, deeper than the fire's heat. Outside, the moon climbs higher, pale and cold. Through the vent above, you can see its faint glow, softened by rising smoke. The tent walls shine silver, the texture of hide turned to silk. You think about all the nights that have looked like this. Hundreds of winters, thousands of fires. The people here didn't conquer the cold. They befriended it, borrowing its strength instead of fearing it. Scholars today still argue whether these snowpacking techniques were purely practical inventions or rooted in ritual, the act of sealing the home as a symbolic gesture of protection before winter's longest stretch. Some claim that piling snow around the lodge base was meant to invite the earth spirit to share its warmth. Others believe it was simply experience, nothing more. But as you sit here, surrounded by the muted glow of snow-filtered moonlight, the air perfect, the silence profound, it feels impossible to separate the spiritual from the sensible. Everything that works here also means something. You lie back, the furs soft beneath you, the faint scent of cedar in the air. The fire crackles once, then settles into a steady heartbeat. You close your eyes, and the last thing you feel is the deep quiet of snow all around you. Heavy, patient, kind. It's as though the world itself has wrapped you in its thickest blanket. Whispering, "Sleep now." You've learned to listen. Morning comes soft and slow, filtered through hide walls tinted amber by the first sun. The storm has passed, leaving behind a world glazed with ice. You wake to muffled laughter and the rustle of blankets being folded. The air smells faintly of smoke and animal fat. The fire in the center glows low and steady, breathing warmth into every corner. Outside, children are already running between tents, their feet leaving light prints in the snow. Inside, you begin to notice something curious. How everyone's movement has a pattern, an order that feels quietly deliberate. A woman near the fire points to a line of sleeping mats and smiles. "The elders here," she says, patting the spot closest to the flame. "They earned the warmest dreams." You follow her gaze. An old man is still wrapped tightly in furs, his face half hidden, snoring softly. On his other side, two young children lie tangled together beneath a heavy robe, their small breaths rising and falling like waves. You realize there's an architecture to this arrangement. Bodies as insulation, love as design. You glance around the circle and start to piece it together. The elders, always closest to the fire, their bones needing the most warmth. The parents just beyond them, tending the flames if they falter. The children at the outer edges, bundled thick, forming a kind of living perimeter. It's brilliant and simple. The warmest hearts at the center, the strongest bodies guarding the rim. You think of modern houses divided by walls and doors, and wonder how much heat we've traded for distance. Someone hands you a bowl of warm broth, rich and smoky. "Eat," the woman says. The fire feeds you, but food reminds it you're alive. You sip, letting the warmth bloom in your chest. Around you, the tent hums with quiet activity. A young boy pokes the embers, feeding them bits of wood. A mother braids her daughter's hair, humming softly. Even here, in the smallest gestures, you can feel the rhythm of survival, a steady, unspoken choreography. You ask if they always sleep in the same order, and the woman nods. "Mostly," she says, "except when someone's sick. Then we move closer, so they don't sleep alone." She smiles, eyes distant. Warmth listens best when it's shared. The phrase settles deep in you, gentle and profound. You notice, too, how the fire never quite dies. Even when no one tends it, someone will stir at the right moment, toss in a twig, adjust the vent. You think it's coincidence until an old man opens one eye and chuckles. "We sleep in turns without meaning to," he says. "The fire wakes who it needs." It sounds mystical, but as you watch, it feels true. The rhythm of breathing, the crackle of flame, the sigh of wind through hide. It's all one continuous pulse. Outside, the wind is rising again. You can hear it brush along the tents, a whisper at first, then a steady hum. Inside, no one stirs in fear. The woman at your side simply tosses a robe over the children and tucks the edges close. "The cold talks too much," she says, grinning. "Ignore it." The children giggle, half asleep, their cheeks flushed with warmth. There's an intimacy here that feels ancient, one you rarely see in your own world, where beds are islands and silence is a wall. Here, even sleep is communal. It's not just rest, it's trust. You lie back on your mat, the floor still faintly warm from the buried stones beneath, and watch the slow dance of smoke rising through the vent. The old man mutters something in his language, and though you don't understand the words, the tone carries a blessing. You think about how this design, the sleeping circle, the placement by age and strength, has probably existed for centuries. You'd once read that explorers who visited plains camps were astonished at how organized the interiors were, calling them orderly nests of humanity. They didn't mean it kindly, but you can't help thinking they accidentally named something beautiful. The woman across the fire begins to tell a story to the children, her voice soft, almost a lullaby. She speaks of the great frost, when the sky froze and stars fell like snowflakes. The people, she says, survived by sleeping so close that their dreams tangled together, forming a net strong enough to hold the warmth of the sun until spring returned. The children listen, wide-eyed, pulling their blankets tighter. You realize this isn't just a bedtime story. It's a map of memory disguised as myth. You catch yourself smiling as she continues. The firelight flickers on her face, illuminating every line of care and laughter. She glances at you, amused. You think we just tell stories to pass the time? She asks. We tell them to remember how to breathe. You nod, humbled. Every generation here carries not just knowledge, but rhythm. The pulse of survival sung into being. Some scholars argue that these family sleeping arrangements weren't purely for warmth, that they reflected the deeper spiritual hierarchy of the lodge, with the sacred fire at its center, elders as keepers of its spirit, and children as its future promise. Others dismiss this as romantic projection by outsiders, insisting it was merely efficient design. But lying here, watching the way people adjust blankets for each other even in their sleep, you suspect both are right. Function and meaning rarely travel alone. The night deepens. The storm's voice grows louder outside, but inside, the warmth feels almost defiant. The fire burns low, the hides glimmer gold, and the air tastes faintly of cedar. You close your eyes and listen to the breathing around you. Slow, steady, layered like the hides themselves. Somewhere near the fire, the old man snores softly, and a child giggles before drifting back into dreams. For a moment, you imagine yourself centuries earlier, another traveler, another stranger allowed into this circle. You picture all those who came before, hunters, mothers, storytellers, curled together under the same light, trusting the same fragile flame. The thought fills you with a quiet awe. You pull your robe tighter and sink deeper into the warmth. The world outside might be frozen solid, but here inside this ring of bodies and breath, the night hums with life. The cold can wait. Tonight, warmth belongs to those who keep each other close. By the next morning, the world outside the tent smells faintly of thawing wood and smoke-stained air. The storm has drifted east, leaving the sky pale as bone and the ground glittering with frost. You crawl out into the light, boots crunching softly on the snow crust, and breathe in the cold that feels so clean it almost burns. The camp is waking slowly, fire pits smoking, people stretching under fur cloaks, and then something catches you. An aroma so thick and heavy, you can almost taste it. It's coming from the lodge beside you. When you pull the flap aside, a rush of warm, greasy air greets you, and for a moment, you're back inside the belly of the earth itself. The woman by the fire looks up from her pot and laughs. "Smells like home, doesn't it?" she says. You nod, though you're not sure whether it's a compliment or confession. The scent is wild. Wood smoke, boiled meat, animal fat melting in heat. It's not unpleasant, just ancient. You notice how every surface glows with that same sheen. Grease rubbed into hide, ash brushed into seams. Even the tent poles glimmer faintly, polished smooth by years of touch. It's not filth, it's preservation. The woman stirs her pot and says, "Smoke keeps us warm, fat keeps us dry." She lifts a bowl of melted tallow and dips a strip of hide into it. The liquid thickens as it cools, sealing the material. "If the snow can't find a way in," she says, "the warmth won't run away." You realize that smell isn't just a side effect, it's armor. The mixture of wood smoke and animal oil coats everything. A living barrier against weather. It seeps into clothing, hair, bedding. You can't escape it, but you also can't freeze through it. The air feels dense, protective, familiar. She grins when she catches you sniffing the sleeve of your robe. "Don't fight it," she teases. "That's the scent of survival." In the corner, a man is cleaning the inside of the lodge, scraping soot from the poles with a flat bone tool. The soot falls in dark flakes that he gathers carefully in a bowl. You ask what it's for, and he shrugs. Medicine sometimes, ink for stories, or just to keep away the shine. You tilt your head, curious. The shine? He grins. Snow spirits like shiny things. We make it dark so they forget us. The way he says it makes you smile. But something about the logic feels oddly scientific. Dark surfaces absorb heat. Even superstition here carries wisdom. As you settle near the fire, your eyes adjust to the half light. The interior looks almost golden now, the hides glowing softly under a layer of soot. The air hums faintly, thick with warmth. You close your eyes for a second and imagine the first people who ever built a fire like this inside a shelter. How terrifying it must have been. The fear of choking smoke, of flames devouring the only thing standing between life and night. And yet somehow they found the perfect balance. Vent high enough to breathe, walls treated to resist sparks, smoke dense enough to waterproof the hides. The woman sprinkles dried herbs into the fire. Sage, cedar, a pinch of something sharp and sweet. The smoke rises blue and fragrant, weaving through the air like a spell. She tells you that before winter truly settles, they rub the hides with mixtures of tallow and crushed bark to keep them supple. If the hides grow stiff, she says, they start to sing. You laugh and she nods earnestly. Yes, really, they groan in the wind. A bad omen. You listen carefully. And sure enough, when the wind outside shifts, you can hear a faint moan through the walls. Low, hollow, almost musical. It's strange how alive everything feels. The tent, the fire, even the smells. You begin to understand that here, cleanliness isn't about sterility, but balance. Smoke keeps away rot. Fat keeps away moisture, and both together keep away the cold. You think of modern homes scrubbed of scent, sterile and dry, and wonder if we've traded too much comfort for too little presence. You ask if the smoke ever becomes too much, if they ever tire of its cling. The old man scraping soot looks up. Sometimes, he says, when the air won't move. Then we lift the flap and let the world in. He pauses, then adds with a grin. But if it smells too clean in here, we know someone forgot the fire. His tone turns serious for a moment. No smoke, no life. Later, when the light fades, the lodge fills again with chatter. A girl brings in a pot of melted snow water, pouring it into a wooden bowl. She mixes it with soot and grease, creating a thick black paste. The old man dips a stick into it and begins tracing lines on the hide wall. A spiral, a sun, a river. It remembers where we've been, he says, not looking up. The smoke swirls around him like a curtain. You realize the entire tent is both shelter and memory. Every stain and scent, a piece of history written in air. There's an ongoing debate. You recall among historians about whether the heavy, smoke-laden interiors of these lodges were intentionally cultivated as part of ritual purity, or were simply unavoidable consequences of living with open fire. Some argue that the scent itself became cultural identity. Travelers could recognize a camp long before seeing it, just by catching a whiff of its wind. Others claim that practicality came first, the symbolism later. Sitting here, feeling the thick warmth press against your skin, it's hard to separate the two. The smoke feels sacred because it saves you. As night deepens, the fire burns lower. The woman smears one final coat of grease onto the hide wall, her movements slow, methodical. The faint gleam catches the light, turning the tent into something organic, as if it were skin rather than shelter. The air smells of earth and animal and ash. You close your eyes and inhale deeply. It's heavy, yes, but grounding. It feels like the smell of belonging. Outside, snow begins again, whispering softly against the walls. You can hear it piling higher, but inside, the warmth holds steady. The woman hums an old song, voice deep and calm, and for the first time you understand. The camp doesn't fight the elements, it negotiates with them. Every scent, every texture, every bit of smoke is part of that silent agreement. You curl, up near the fire, feeling the soot on your skin, the faint oil on your robe, and realize how thoroughly the environment has claimed you. The cold has been locked out not by walls alone, but by the invisible skin of scent and ritual that wraps around everything here. You fall asleep to that smell, smoke, grease, and warmth. ancient as survival itself. The night feels different, tonight, quiet, but alive, as though the stars themselves are leaning close to listen. You sit just outside the lodge, wrapped in fur, the snow beneath you sparkling faintly in the firelight. The sky stretches wide and deep, a cold ocean freckled with constellations you don't know by name, but recognize by rhythm. Behind you, the low murmur of voices drifts from the tent, soft and steady, like a heartbeat muffled by distance. A man steps out beside you, his breath turning to silver mist. He's carrying a small pouch tied with red cord and sets it carefully on the snow. You watch as he opens it and scatters a few pinches of powder into the fire. The flames flare blue, then green, before settling back to orange. He closes his eyes for a moment, murmuring words that sound older than language. You don't ask what they mean. The silence between his syllables feels sacred enough. When he finishes, he nods toward the fire. For the ones who came before, he says, they sleep in the wind now. You follow the way the smoke rises, curling toward the stars, and for a heartbeat it seems to waver into shapes. Faces, maybe, or memories. The fire snaps and sends a spray of sparks upward, like tiny souls climbing into the night. He sits beside you, the fur on his shoulders dusted with frost. Do you dream here? He asks. You hesitate, then nod. Strange dreams, you admit. Fire that speaks, snow that sings. He smiles, unsurprised. Good. That means the place knows you. His tone is light, but something in it lingers. A suggestion that the border between waking and dreaming is thinner than you thought. Inside the lodge, laughter stirs briefly before quieting again. The air hums faintly, charged with warmth and presence. You realize that for these people, sleep isn't a pause in life. It's a continuation of it, another way of listening to the world. Each night, the boundary between body and spirit softens, and through that thin curtain drift stories, omens, and conversations with the unseen. The man leans forward, feeding another stick into the fire. When we sleep, he says, we visit the ones who are waiting. They remind us what to do when we wake. You ask him if everyone dreams the same way, and he chuckles. No, some travel too far and forget to come back until morning. Others barely close their eyes and hear the songs anyway. He looks at you sideways. Maybe that's why you're here, to remember someone else's dream. You don't know what to say to that, so you just watch the fire. The wood hisses, releasing a slow, fragrant smoke that smells faintly of cedar and something sweet. Berries, perhaps. You remember being told that certain tribes burned berries or bits of sweetgrass at night to please the spirits who guarded their sleep. The belief, or maybe it was a truth, was that sweet smells attracted kind presences, while bitter ones warned the restless dead to keep their distance. You wonder which kind the air carries now. The fire crackles, and the man speaks again, softer this time. When someone dies in winter, he says, we burn their fire high, so it doesn't freeze before it reaches the sky. He looks at the stars, his voice barely a whisper. If the fire goes out too soon, they wander cold. So we keep it burning, even if the snow tries to drown it. His words hang in the air like frost. You feel your chest tighten. It's not grief he's sharing, it's responsibility. Later, when you step back into the lodge, the air is heavy and warm. The smell of smoke clings to everything. Clothing, hair, dreams. The others are already lying down, wrapped in their robes. A few murmured words drift from the shadows, half prayer, half lullaby. You settle near the fire, its last light brushing your face. As your eyes adjust, you notice shapes painted on the hide walls. Circles, spirals, figures that seem to move when the fire flickers. You ask the woman nearest you if those are decorations. She smiles faintly. They are doors, she says, to where the stories go when we sleep. You glance again, and for a heartbeat, you almost believe her. The smoke drifts across the drawings, softening their lines until they look like mist rising from water. She closes her eyes and begins to hum. The sound is low and steady, matching the rhythm of your heartbeat. Others join in, a quiet chorus that fills the air like a tide. You realize this isn't a song meant for waking ears. It's a bridge between this world and whatever waits just beyond the dark. The melody swells and fades, and slowly, everyone begins to drift off. Historians have long debated whether these nightly songs were simply communal lullabies or something deeper. Rituals meant to connect sleepers to ancestors or to guide their spirits safely through dreams. Some argue that dream sharing was a deliberate act of storytelling, a way to preserve memory in a world without written words. Others insist it was coincidence, imagination spun by tired minds. But sitting here, surrounded by the hum of voices, and the soft glow of firelight, you can feel it in your bones. This is communication, not coincidence. The air thickens as sleep begins to pull at you. You close your eyes and see the fire behind your lids, still burning, its light threading through the dark. You imagine drifting upward with the smoke, carried into the endless sky where the stars wait like quiet sentinels. You feel the world tilt gently, your body both heavy and weightless. And somewhere in that space between waking and dreaming, you hear the faint echo of laughter, old voices, kind ones, welcoming you back to the circle. When you wake hours later, the fire is only a faint glow and the lodge is still. Yet you swear you can feel something else lingering, a warmth deeper than heat, a presence beyond the room. You sit up slowly, heart calm, and realize that sleep here isn't an escape from the cold, but another form of warmth entirely. It's connection. Fire turned inward, glowing behind closed eyes. When you wake again, the first thing you feel is warmth, dense and steady, but not from the fire. Something presses lightly against your legs, breathing softly. You blink the sleep away and glance down to find a pair of eyes watching you, golden in the low glow of embers. A dog, thick-furred, calm, its muzzle flecked with frost, lies half across your blanket as if it has decided you're part of its pack. You reach out, hesitating, and it thumps its tail against the floor, offering permission. Its fur is coarse, on the outside, downy beneath, and radiates a surprising heat. "He's been there all night," someone murmurs from the shadows. The voice belongs to the boy who'd once rolled himself in hides. He likes strangers, thinks they're cold. The boy grins, teeth gleaming in the firelight. He's smarter than most people. You sit up, still wrapped in your robe, the dog's head now resting on your knee. The smell of smoke and fur fills the air, comforting, heavy. Another dog stretches near the fire, yawning so wide you can see steam rise from its mouth. There must be half a dozen of them scattered around the lodge, curled at corners, wedged beside sleeping children, one even resting its chin on an elder's ankle. It's clear they aren't pets in the modern sense. They're part of the architecture, part of the night's warmth. A woman stirring the embers smiles when she sees your bewilderment. "They guard the fire when we sleep," she says, scratching one behind the ear. "And they share their breath with us when the world freezes." You imagine it now, winter at its worst. The air outside colder than thought, yet inside these living, breathing furnaces curled close to human skin, lending their warmth freely. There's a story. She tells you that long ago, when people first learned to build shelters, the dogs refused to stay outside. They circled the camp and howled until they were let in. They said, she adds with a grin, that the stars were too cold for their bones. You laugh quietly, picturing it, the first night of shared warmth between two species, a pact that's never been broken. Outside, dawn presses faintly against the hide walls, a dull white glow. The dogs stretch and shake, scattering bits of frost and fur. One pads toward the entrance flap and pokes its nose through, sniffing the new air. Another settles beside a child still asleep, curling protectively around her feet. It's not sentiment, it's instinct. Warmth shared is warmth, multiplied. You recall reading somewhere that early explorers of the northern plains noted how native camps relied on their dogs not just for pulling Sleds, or carrying loads but for sleeping heat. On the coldest nights, entire families would sleep interwoven with them, fur against fur, skin against skin. The explorers wrote about it half in awe, half in disbelief, perhaps forgetting that even they sought warmth in their own coats and cloaks made from animal hide. The difference, you think, is that here, warmth isn't taken, it's exchanged. The woman ladles out a broth thick with marrow and offers you a bowl. One of the dogs follows her every move, tail wagging in slow circles. She laughs, tossing it a scrap. They earn their share, she says. They chase away hunger dreams. You tilt your head, curious. Hunger dreams? She nods. When your belly's empty, the cold comes for your thoughts first. The dogs keep them full. You smile at the phrasing, unsure whether she means it literally or as poetry. Either way, it fits. You sip your broth, its heat cutting through the chill that clings to your chest. The boy from before leans over the fire, poking at it with a stick. Some people say dogs came from the stars, he says matter-of-factly. That's why their eyes shine. He glances at you, daring you to disagree. You don't. He nods, satisfied, and returns to his task. The dogs stir restlessly as the day brightens. Two begin to play, snapping at each other's ears, their movements a blur of energy and joy. The sound of their paws on the packed snow outside is rhythmic, like drumming. You step out to watch as a few men harness the larger dogs to travois, the wooden sleds dragging light loads. Their breath rises in white plumes, their tails high, eager to move. Work for them is joy, motion another form of heat. A gust of wind cuts across the plain, sharp enough to sting, and one of the dogs, small, black, with eyes like amber, presses itself against your leg again. You feel its warmth even through the layers of hide. You kneel, scratching behind its ears, and it leans into you as though the exchange is mutual, as though you're giving it something in return. Maybe you are. Later, when the wind strengthens and snow begins to fall again, the camp folds inward toward the fires. Inside the lodge, the dogs curl close once more, forming living barriers against the chill. The woman who had spoken of hunger dreams smiles as she settles beside one. Their fur keeps the ghosts of cold away, she whispers, half to herself. You wonder whether she means that literally. Too, there's an old debate among anthropologists whether the relationship between humans and dogs in early winter camps was driven purely by practicality, or whether it was, in its own way, emotional, spiritual. Some claim the animals were treated as tools, others insist they were kin. Watching now, seeing the dog's tail flick in its sleep, the child's hand resting unconsciously on its back, you know the truth can't be divided so neatly. Warmth doesn't care who owns it. It only asks to be shared. The fire pops softly, casting light that turns the dog's fur to liquid gold. You settle down again, your borrowed companion pressed against your side. Its breathing slows, deep and even, and without meaning to, you match it. For a while, there's no line between you, just the rhythm of shared breath in a world that's otherwise frozen still. You close your eyes, the sounds of the lodge fading into the background, the crackle of flame, the sigh of wind, the faint twitch of paws dreaming. And in that quiet, you understand that warmth isn't always built from wood or hide or stone. Sometimes it comes on four legs, with a heartbeat that hums like a lullaby in the dark. By mid-morning, the sky is wide and restless again, streaked with ribbons of pale cloud. The snow has hardened overnight, and it crunches beneath every footstep like brittle paper. You follow the camp's movement as they begin their daily rituals, tending to the horses, brushing frost from hides, checking the ropes that hold the lodges in place. The world feels enormous out here, endless and raw. You can see for miles, yet the people move through it like they belong to every inch of it. A man waves you over to a clearing where several families have gathered. He's holding a long pipe made from polished stone, its bowl carved in the shape of a bird's head. The air around him smells faintly of tobacco and cedar. He offers it to each person in turn, and though you expect solemn silence, there's laughter too. An easy rhythm that feels both sacred and ordinary. The man looks at you smiling. We share smoke before we share trade, he says simply. You watch as people begin laying items on blankets, furs, carved beads, strips of dried meat, obsidian tools. In the center sits a small pile of goods that clearly didn't come from this camp. Woven cloth dyed a deep blue, iron knives with handles wrapped in leather, and a few shiny metal pots that glint sharply against the snow. You realize what you're seeing isn't just an exchange of goods. but of warmth, knowledge, comfort, survival, all passing between people who've met like this 100 winters before. A woman kneels beside you, her hair streaked with grey. They came from the east, she says, nodding toward the traders. Their lodges breathe differently. We learn from them. They learn from us. You look closer and notice the small differences she means. Thicker hides, narrower tents, a different style of smoke vent. You can almost see the flow of ideas through the landscape, carried by wind and footsteps instead of books. One of the visitors laughs, his voice carrying across the clearing. He's wrapped in a fur cloak patched from fox and wolf, his face painted in bright ochre. When he smiles, his teeth flash white against the color. He gestures toward one of the buffalo hide tents nearby. "That's the warmest skin on the plains," he declares proudly. "We tried elk once. It cracked like ice." Everyone laughs and a few nod knowingly. You get the feeling that these jokes have been told for generations, each one a small reminder that even survival has humor. The trading continues into the afternoon, and you watch as one man carefully folds a new piece of blue cloth into his robe. It's a rare color here, deep as twilight, and when he holds it up, the light turns it almost violet. A child reaches out to touch it, eyes wide. The man lets her. You realize that this moment, this small, unremarkable exchange, is part of something much larger. Trade isn't just about things. It's about connection. It's about carrying warmth from one camp to another across the coldest months. You've read before that trade routes across the Great Plains stretched farther than most people imagine, linking tribes from the Rocky Mountains to the Great Lakes. They carried more than tools and furs. They carried stories, songs, even techniques for surviving the worst winters. The shape of a lodge, the way a hide was treated, the secret of packing snow for insulation. All of it could travel hundreds of miles simply through one conversation by a fire. As the day deepens, you sit beside a circle of people who are sharing roasted meat. The smell of fat sizzling in the flames mingles with the smoke of the pipe still being passed around. Someone tells a joke about a man who traded his best horse for a pot that couldn't boil water. The laughter that follows feels like its own kind of warmth. Louder, freer, more human than anything a fire could make. A young man, eyes bright with curiosity, asks you where you come from. You tell him, hesitantly, that your home is far away, that your winters are tamed by walls and machines. He listens quietly, then gestures to the snow around you. "Our walls are alive," he says. "They breathe with us. Can yours do that?" You open your mouth, then close it again. He grins, satisfied with your silence. "Maybe you'll learn," he adds. As dusk nears, the visitors prepare to leave. They tie their goods to sleds and horses, wrapping everything carefully in hides. Before they go, they share one final fire, small, bright, fiercely alive against the darkening sky. Everyone gathers close. Smoke curls upward, golden at the base, black near the top, dissolving into the first hint of stars. The older woman beside you begins to hum a tune, and one by one, others join in. It's not a song of farewell, but something gentler, like gratitude whispered to the air. When it ends, the visitors clasp hands with the hosts, their laughter carrying out into the open plain. In a few minutes, they're gone, just distant figures fading into the snow, taking warmth with them, but leaving some behind too. There's an ongoing debate among scholars about how much influence these exchanges truly had, whether ideas about shelter and fire passed freely between nations or developed independently across different regions. Some argue that the tipi's design evolved simultaneously in several places. Others insist it spread like a spark from one culture to the next. Watching the smoke rise and drift eastward, you can't help but think knowledge travels the same way, riding the wind, invisible but unstoppable. Night descends slowly. The camp glows again, each fire a new beacon in the dark. You sit beside the same man who'd smoked the pipe that morning, and he offers you a piece of dried meat. "We trade for what keeps us alive," he says, "but we share what keeps us human." He nods toward the horizon, where the last flicker of firelight from the departing traders is barely visible. They'll remember our warmth, and we'll remember theirs. You look up. The stars are bright now, brighter than you've ever seen them. The air stings your face, but inside your chest there's a quiet heat, a small fire lit not by wood or stone, but by something older, passed hand to hand across the endless snow. The land changes as you travel east. Trees begin to appear, first in scattered clusters, then in dense gatherings that rise like dark sentinels against the horizon. The open wind of the plains softens into whispers, broken by the creak of frozen branches and the occasional rush of wings overhead. You step into the shadow of the forest and feel the air shift. Damp, fragrant, layered with scents of bark and moss. The snow here doesn't howl, it sighs. The people who call this place home move differently from the plains dwellers. Their footsteps are quieter, their shelters tucked beneath the arms of the trees. You follow a narrow trail until you reach a clearing where the lodges are shaped, not like tall cones, but gentle domes. Smoke rises from the tops in slow, lazy ribbons, curling through the canopy before fading into the grey sky. A man greets you with a nod, his breath puffing in white clouds. He gestures toward one of the structures, its walls gleaming pale gold beneath a dusting of snow. As you step closer, you realize it's made of overlapping sheets of birch bark, stitched carefully with spruce roots and lined inside with woven mats of cattail and rush. The bark breathes, the man says. It keeps the rain out, but it lets the fire live. His words feel poetic, yet entirely practical. You run your fingers along the bark. It's smooth and faintly oily, almost waxy. When you knock it lightly, it gives a hollow sound, like a drum. He smiles. That's the tree's skin, he says. It remembers sunlight even in winter. You grin at the phrase, but as you watch the light glint across the surface, you can almost believe it. Inside, the air is thick with warmth and the scent of cedar. The fire in the center burns clean and bright, feeding through a vent hole at the top. The walls shimmer faintly where the inner lining of bark meets the heat. It's like standing inside a living lantern. You sit on a mat woven from reeds, soft and springy under your fingers. Every element feels natural, yet deliberate. The kind of comfort built by hands that know the texture of the earth better than any tool could. A woman stirs a pot suspended over the fire, her face illuminated by its glow. "You're used to buffalo hide, aren't you?" she asks with a smile. You nod, and she chuckles. Out there, the hides breathe against the wind. Here, the trees do it for us. She ladles steaming broth into a wooden bowl and passes it to you. It tastes of fish and wild onion, the flavor grounding you to the soil beneath your feet. The man sits beside you and begins to explain how their lodges, wigwams he calls them, are built for endurance, not mobility. The plains move, he says. The forest waits. His words linger in the smoky air. The frame of each lodge is made from saplings bent into arcs and tied at the top, forming a ribbed skeleton like the inside of a giant animal. Over it, layers of bark and mats are placed, each one overlapping like scales to shed rain and trap heat. You can feel the precision in every curve, every seam. He tells you that in deep winter, they line the walls with moss and fir, even banking snow around the outside for extra insulation. You can't help but smile at the irony. Snow again, the enemy turned ally. He nods knowingly. The cold doesn't fight us if we give it a job. The firelight flickers, and you notice the ceiling above is darker, smoke-stained in broad streaks. That's how we know the lodge is breathing right, the woman says. If the bark stays pale, the smoke is trapped. If it darkens evenly, the air is clean. You marvel at how something so simple becomes a kind of living barometer, one that tells its own story every night. Outside, the forest groans softly as wind moves through the branches. The sound feels alive, more intimate than the plain's endless roar. The man listens for a moment, then says, "The trees sing when it's cold. You just have to learn their tune." You tilt your head, and sure enough, the pitch changes with each gust, like a distant choir. You recall reading once that woodland tribes used birch bark, not only for their homes, but also for canoes, baskets, even scrolls of written memory. Its combination of flexibility, lightness, and natural waterproofing made it invaluable in this region, where winters were long and damp. The knowledge of how to peel it without killing the tree was an art in itself. Take too much, and the birch would die. Take too little, and it would rot before the next season. Balance again. Always balance. As you sit there, watching the firelight slide across the walls, you realize how different this warmth feels. It's not the defiance of the plains, where survival means facing the wind head-on. Here, it's quieter, humbler. Warmth doesn't challenge the cold. It coexists with it, finds space between the trees where life can hum softly. The woman adds another log to the fire and sits back. When I was a girl, she says, my grandmother told me the birch tree keeps secrets. Every mark on its bark is a story it heard but never told. She laughs, eyes bright. Maybe that's why our lodges are made from it, so our walls can listen too. You smile, letting her words settle. There's a scholarly argument, you remember, about whether these bark lodges were meant to be permanent winter homes or seasonal dwellings used while hunting or fishing. Some researchers insist they were temporary, replaced each year as part of a cycle of movement. Others claim certain families reinforced the same lodges season after season, letting the forest reclaim them only after death. Sitting here now, you can sense both possibilities. The structure sturdy enough to last, yet humble enough to yield. Outside, snow begins to fall again, soft flakes landing on the bark roof with faint whispers. The fire pops, throwing sparks that drift upward toward the vent, winking out like tiny fireflies. The man closes his eyes and murmurs something under. His breath, a small thanks maybe to the trees that gave this warmth. You stretch out on the woven mat, feeling the warmth radiate through layers of bark and moss. The air tastes of wood smoke and river water, ancient and clean. Above you, the ceiling glows faintly, alive with movement. The forest itself breathing with you. You realize, as your eyes grow heavy, that here the boundary between shelter and nature disappears completely. The bark, the fire, the people, they all belong to the same living warmth. The river lies silent under a crust of ice, its breath hidden beneath a skin of frost. You can hear it faintly if you listen long enough. The deep, slow gurgle of water, moving in secret, like a heart beating under thick blankets. The air tastes different here, salted, brittle, tinged with oil and smoke. You've traveled north, now, far enough that even the trees begin to thin, leaving a white expanse broken only by low hills and the black smudges of camps in the distance. When you approach one of those camps, you see light dancing, small, steady flames flickering inside half-buried shelters. These aren't the towering teepees or bark lodges you've seen before. They're lower, rounder, their entrances short tunnels that force you to crawl in. The snow piled over them glows faintly blue in the moonlight, and the smoke that escapes through holes in the roofs trails upward like ribbons of silk. You duck through one of the doorways, and the first thing that greets you is heat. Thick, almost startling, like stepping into the inside of a breath. The air smells of seal oil and cedar. The people inside smile as you shake the frost from your robe. One woman gestures toward a small clay lamp set on a stone slab near the center. Its flame is small but unwavering, fed by a wick made from twisted moss floating in a bowl of pale, shimmering fat. "Our sun," she says simply. The lamp burns with a light that seems impossibly steady for such a fragile flame. Around it, the walls gleam softly, the snow and ice packed so carefully that they reflect the firelight like glass. You run your hand along one wall and are shocked by how smooth it feels, almost warm where the heat of the lamp touches it. "The cold protects us," the woman says, noticing your amazement. "The snow keeps the wind out, the ice keeps the warmth in. Only foolish men freeze when they have hands to shape the earth." You sit cross-legged beside the lamp, mesmerized by its soft hiss. She stirs it gently with a carved bone spoon, adding a drop more oil from a pouch. "We burn the world that swims," she says. You realize she means fish and seal fat, the lifeblood of the north. The flame flares briefly, then steadies again, the light rippling across faces in the dim space. There's a strange comfort in the rhythm of the lamp's flicker. You notice that its glow reaches every corner, no shadows deep enough to hide in. People move slowly, their gestures deliberate, conserving energy in a place where waste means death. Children sit close to their mothers, rubbing their hands to keep circulation flowing. One man sharpens a bone knife with careful rhythmic strokes. The sound blends with the faint popping of the wick, a music of necessity. You ask how long a single lamp can burn, and she smiles. All night if you feed it right. The flame knows hunger like we do. She dips her fingers in the oil, rubbing a bit across the wick's base. The flame brightens in response, golden now, casting halos across the snow walls. You see? She whispers. It listens. In that glow, you begin to notice details. The small holes poked near the top of the dome, the fur mats lining the floor, the faint trace of steam rising from bowls near the walls. The entire space feels like a machine built from instinct, every surface reflecting warmth back toward its center. You realize this tiny home is a masterpiece of thermal logic, a place where physics and faith share the same vocabulary. The man sharpening his knife looks up, eyes glinting in the light. We don't chase the fire like the plains people, he says. We trap it. He grins, tapping the wall gently. Even the cold helps us hold it still. You glance around again, understanding what he means. The snow above is not weakness, it's structure. Frozen air turns solid, forming an insulator so perfect that body heat alone can lift the temperature by dozens of degrees. You can almost feel the proof in your skin. There's a low hum as someone begins to sing, soft, wordless, ancient. It's not a melody meant for ears so much as for the air itself. The sound fills the dome, curling along its curved ceiling, echoing gently. You close your eyes and imagine that this is what the earth might sound like when it dreams. The flame dances in time with the voice, and for a heartbeat you think it's breathing. You recall reading that Arctic and subarctic peoples, Inuit, Cree, Athabascan, often used oil lamps not just for light and heat, but for cooking and drying clothes. One small flame, tended through the night, could keep a family alive. And yet, archaeologists still debate how these lamps were first invented, whether they evolved independently in scattered camps or traveled slowly across generations of migration, carried like holy relics. Watching the woman adjust the flame now, you sense it doesn't matter. Some inventions belong to everyone. The air inside the shelter feels heavy, fragrant with the faint sweetness of burning fat. Your eyes grow heavy, lulled by the hum and the steady glow. The lamp seems brighter now, though you know it's just the darkness deepening outside. The woman reaches over and sets a second lamp beside the first, lighting it with a stick dipped in the flame. 2 fires, she says, for the nights when the wind forgets its way home. As the second lamp catches, the whole room blooms with golden light. The snow glows honey-colored, the walls shimmering as though alive. You watch, entranced, as the warmth spreads, not in temperature alone, but in feeling. It's the kind of warmth that moves through your chest, turning fear into something like peace. The woman looks at you and tilts her head. The cold makes people small, she says softly. But we stay close, and we remember how big our fire can be. You nod, because there's nothing to add. Later, as you drift towards sleep, the lamps still burn, steady, patient, alive. Their flames are so quiet that you can almost hear them breathe. You think about how fragile they are, how easily a gust or carelessness could extinguish everything. Yet they've burned for centuries, hand to hand, wick to wick, a light older than any nation's history. The last thing you see before sleep claims you is the reflection of those twin flames on the snow wall, flickering like twin suns beneath the frozen world. You realize with a shiver of awe that even here, where daylight disappears for months, human warmth never truly leaves. It just changes form, waiting in a lamp, in a song, in a shared breath beneath the ice. By morning, the sky is a sheet of pale glass. The snow glitters like crushed quartz, and the air is so crisp it seems to sing in your lungs. When you step outside, you can smell the faint salt of the frozen river, the lingering trace of smoke, and something sweet. Berries maybe, thawed too soon in the weak light. The people here move slowly, conserving their energy, but every motion feels deliberate, practiced, as if winter has trained their bodies into a kind of quiet grace. A woman waves you over to where several others are kneeling near the riverbank. They're holding bundles of reeds tied with sinew. One by one, they push the reeds into a small opening cut into the ice. You watch puzzled until one of them explains, "The air inside the reeds feeds the fish." She smiles. "If they live, we live." The logic is so simple, so elegant that you almost laugh. Even the smallest gesture here, offering breath to the river, is part of the dance of survival. You sit beside her, watching her hands. Her fingers are bare, though the air is biting cold, and yet she doesn't shiver. "You'll ruin your skin," you say softly, but she shakes her head. "We rub it with seal oil," she replies, holding out her palm. It glistens faintly, smelling faintly of salt and smoke. The cold can't bite what it can't taste. You grin at the phrase, storing it away like a small piece of wisdom wrapped in poetry. Behind you, someone calls out. A man has lifted a long strip of something from the snow, a pelt, dark and heavy. It's a seal skin, thick and supple, stitched carefully with sinew and fur-lined at the edges. He spreads it out flat, and you realize it's not clothing, but a cover. "For the boat," he explains, "and for the house when it leaks." He points toward a low, half-frozen shelter nearby, its roof patched with overlapping strips of hide. When the snow melts, we wear the water instead of letting it in. You step closer, running your hand along the surface. The skin is smooth, almost rubbery, and warm from where it's been handled. The man grins. "Sealskin keeps secrets," he says. "It remembers the sea but forgets the cold." He ties the edges of the hide over a wooden frame, testing the fit. Every motion is efficient, graceful, the kind that comes from repetition across generations. The camp hums with movement. Some people are cutting meat into thin ribbons and hanging it to dry over smoke fires. Others are shaping blocks of snow into windbreaks, their hands red and sure. The smell of burning oil drifts through the air, thick but comforting. You realize that here, warmth isn't static. It's something everyone participates in, a communal task that never ends. A young boy runs past you carrying a pair of boots that gleam darkly in the light. You notice the seams, stitched so tight you can barely see them. He stops to show you proudly. "They're made from seal feet," he says. "They walk like the sea." You blink, unsure if he's joking, but the boots are real, supple and waterproof. He beams. "When the snow melts, my feet stay dry. The seal never forgets how to swim." You laugh, unable to resist his joy. There's something sacred in these small inventions, in the way every element of nature is transformed into protection. Nothing here is wasted, and nothing is merely practical. It's all layered with story, belief, memory. The woman from earlier sits beside you again, rubbing more oil onto her hands. "The sea gives warmth to those who listen," she says. "But if you take too much, it remembers." Her voice carries the weight of warning and gratitude intertwined. You think about what she means. You've read before that many coastal and subarctic tribes believe the seal to be a bridge between worlds. Its life tied to both sea and sky, breathing air yet belonging to the deep. Some believed that harming a seal without proper ritual invited storms, or worse, a winter that refused to end. Scholars still argue whether these beliefs were literal or symbolic, whether they arose from spiritual reverence or simple observation of nature's balance. Watching the seal oil lamps burn steady in every doorway, you suspect the truth is both. The air grows colder as the sun dips low, but the camp brightens with new fires. The lamps glow gold, and the scent of oil thickens again. Children chase each other through the smoke, laughter sharp and pure. You crouch beside one of the smaller fires, feeling its radiant heat on your face. The woman stirs a pot over it, steam curling around her hair like mist. She ladles you a cup of broth that smells faintly of seaweed and salt. "Drink," she says. "It keeps your inside flame awake." You sip, the taste briny and rich. The warmth moves through you slowly, spreading outward until even your fingers stop aching. Around you, people are finishing their evening tasks, checking ropes, sealing cracks, singing softly to the rhythm of work. The sound is low, melodic, comforting. You find yourself humming along, though you don't know the words. The man with the sealskins finishes his repairs and sits beside you. He looks up at the faint stars beginning to pierce the sky. "The night's coming quick," he says. "We'll burn the sea till morning." He nods toward the lamps again. "That's how the world remembers we're still here." By late winter, the cold begins to change its voice. It's still sharp, still merciless, but quieter now. Less a hunter, more a watchman waiting for something to end. The snow hardens underfoot, shining with a crust that cracks like sugar when you step on it. You follow the sound of tools against wood and come upon a group of men and women shaping long poles near the edge of the forest. Their breath drifts upward in slow, ghostly ribbons. One of them nods to you, handing you a length of wood smooth from sanding. It's light but strong, its ends tapered to sharp points. For next season, he says, his voice calm. When we move again. You realize these are the skeletons of tipis, already being prepared even as winter still holds the world in its teeth. The man smiles. You don't wait for spring to start living in it. They're using lodgepole pine, the sacred wood of the plains. You remember reading that entire forests were once managed for this purpose. Each tree chosen for its straightness, stripped carefully, dried slowly over smoke. The poles could last a lifetime, and sometimes longer. Families pass them down through generations, treating them like memory carved into timber. You run your hand over the smooth surface and can almost feel the stories left behind by all the fingers that once did the same. Nearby, a young woman sits cross-legged beside a shallow pit filled with glowing coals. Over it rests a pot of boiling sap mixed with fat. She stirs it with a branch and tests it with her fingertip, then dips the end of a cord into the mixture. Glue, she explains, smiling at your confusion. The sticky kind the trees make for us. When she lifts the cord, it glistens, amber and gold. We seal seams with this. Wind can't find its way in when the trees lend a hand. She hands you a small hardened flake of it. You roll it between your fingers. It smells faintly of pine and smoke, sticky even now. You can eat it too, she adds, grinning when you raise an eyebrow. If you like chewing the forest. You laugh, tucking the resin into your pocket like a souvenir. It's strange to think of something so simple. A tree's tears, being the difference between warmth and frostbite, survival and loss. The work around you continues in silence, save for the sound of tools, the rhythm of human patience. Each pole is measured, cut, and marked by hand. The air smells of sap, ash, and something faintly sweet, like the promise of spring. You watch a child help her mother tie a bundle of sinew ropes, their small hands mirroring each other's movements perfectly. The mother doesn't speak, just smiles when the knots tighten true. Here, the act of making is a language all its own. When they rest, the man from earlier tells you that even during the harshest winters, they keep preparing for movement. If we stop, he says, the cold thinks it's won. He glances toward the horizon where snow drifts blur into mist. We stay ready. That's how you live through something that never dies. There's something poetic about it. The idea that survival here isn't just about endurance, but anticipation. You think of modern people waiting for warmth to come, as if comfort was something granted, not built. Here, comfort is a craft. As the day fades, they stack the poles in careful rows, tying them together with strips of hide. The bundles stand tall in the snow like resting spears. You ask how many poles make one lodge, and the young woman answers without hesitation. 12 to 15, if the wind's kind. 20, if you have many mouths to feed. She looks toward the nearest tent, smoke curling from its vent. Each pole knows where it belongs. The strongest ones face the north. You smile, tracing the logic in her words. It's as if every piece of the world, wood, wind, hide, has its own role in the choreography of warmth. You glance up at the sky, where clouds drift low and slow, and think about how much of human survival has always depended on simply paying attention. The men start to sing as they work, low and rhythmic, a melody that matches the steady pace of their hands. You don't understand the words, but the sound fits perfectly with the smell of pine and smoke, the glow of coals, the steady pull of rope. The forest answers with creaks and sighs of its own, branches moving like old joints settling. Later, as night falls, everyone gathers around a single large fire. The poles now rest in a perfect circle, ready for their next journey. The young woman passes around a small cup filled with the pine resin she made earlier, now hardened into candy-like lumps. For luck, she says, you bite one, and it's bitter, sticky, but strangely comforting, like chewing on sunlight caught too soon. As they talk and laugh, you notice the way their faces glow orange from the firelight, their breath catching the last of the warmth before it rises into the cold. Someone mentions that long ago, people built lodges entirely from wood and bark before buffalo hides became their walls. Another adds that some claim the teepee's cone shape wasn't copied from the land, but from the stars themselves, mirroring constellations used to guide migrations. The debate continues quietly, half serious, half myth. You listen, realizing that maybe both ideas can be true, that the sky and the earth have always conspired together to teach survival. The wind picks up again, whispering through the trees, but no one flinches. The man nearest you tosses another log into the fire and says, "Winter's only dangerous when you forget what it taught you last year." The sparks leap upward, scattering like stars, vanishing into the dark. You sit back, your body sore but content, the smell of resin still on your hands. The fire hums, the poles stand ready, and the cold feels almost like a friend now. A stern teacher, patient and unrelenting. The people around you begin to drift into quiet conversation. Some wrapping themselves in furs, others staring at the flames as if seeing memories inside them. You close your eyes for a moment, listening to the mix of laughter, wind and wood cracking in heat. Every sound carries warmth. Every breath carries history. The cold still rules the land, but you can feel something stirring beneath it, life rehearsing its return. The first hint of thaw comes not in sight, but in sound. One morning, the silence that has ruled for months fractures with a slow, liquid murmur, the river beneath its icy shell whispering again. It's faint, barely there, but everyone in camp hears it. The children stop mid-play. The dogs lift their heads. Even the elders glance toward the horizon, as if listening to an old friend waking from a long sleep. You step outside and feel the air shift. It's still cold, sharp enough to sting, but there's something new carried on the wind, a promise hidden under the scent of melting snow and wet earth. The camp hums with a subtle energy, quiet yet unmistakable. It's not warmth, not yet, but hope pretending to be. A man waves you over to the riverbank where several people are gathered. They're standing beside holes cut through the ice, watching the water move beneath. A woman kneels to dip her hand in and laughs, shaking droplets from her fingers. The river breathes again, she says, eyes shining. It's time to wake the camp. You watch as they begin to shift their routines. Fires burn lower now, more for cooking than defense. The hides that once sealed the lodges tight are lifted to let air flow through. Smoke thins in the sky, replaced by faint trails of mist rising from the river itself. You hadn't realized how heavy winter's silence had become until it starts to lift. The men begin checking the poles stacked near the forest edge, pulling them free of snow and testing their strength. Some are replaced with fresh ones cut from younger trees, their sap still fragrant. Children help carry small bundles of rope, laughing when the snow collapses under their feet. The camp is preparing to move again, not in panic or haste, but in rhythm with the world's own slow awakening. A woman sits cross-legged near the fire, sewing together strips of dried hide. You kneel beside her, watching the careful motion of her hands. "We patch everything now," she says without looking up. The thaw is a trickster. It breaks what the cold could not. She runs her finger along the seam. "You fix your house before the river steals its shadow." Her words sound like poetry, but they're practical too. She points to a small pile of broken tools beside her. Bone needles, snapped sinew, cracked wood. "Winter eats what it likes," she says, smiling faintly. "We feed it our mistakes." You grin, understanding. Even decay here has purpose. Nothing ends without teaching something first. Nearby, a group of hunters are preparing gear for the first spring journey. Their bows are unstrung, their arrows inspected one by one. They talk quietly about where the herds might return, where the snow melts first, where the wind smells of grass. You catch fragments of old stories between their words, memories of hunts past, of years when the thaw came late and hunger lingered. One man spits into the snow and mutters, "The earth owes us an easier one." No one disagrees. You remember reading that, for many tribes, the shift from deep winter to thaw was marked by small rituals of gratitude, tiny offerings of tobacco or food cast into the melting rivers to thank the spirits for letting the world survive another season. It wasn't celebration so much as conversation, a way of acknowledging that survival was never a guarantee, only a partnership renewed. That night, as the air softens, the camp gathers near the river. A low song begins, unhurried, layered with voices that blend like water over stone. Someone throws a handful of herbs into the fire, and the smoke that rises smells sweet. Juniper, sage, something else you can't name. It curls upward and drifts over the river's surface like a bridge. The reflection of the flames dances on the ice, flickering like small spirits slipping between seasons. You sit with an elder who watches silently for a while before speaking. "The river is a memory," he says. "It freezes to rest, then flows to remind us who we were." He stirs the embers with a stick. If you listen long enough, you can hear the voices of those who crossed before. You tilt your head, and for a heartbeat, you swear you do. Faint echoes carried in the melting water, laughter and footsteps beneath the ice. The song fades, leaving only the sound of dripping snow from the lodge roofs. A child runs by, holding a small stick with a feather tied to it, waving it through the air as if blessing the wind. Her laughter rings high and pure, brighter than any fire. She's calling the geese back, someone says, smiling. The sky needs to remember where home is. You laugh softly, marveling at how seamlessly play and prayer exist here, indistinguishable from one another. As the night deepens, a gentle mist rises from the river, wrapping the camp in a translucent veil. You can see the glow of every fire through it, blurred but warm. The air is damp now, clinging to your skin, carrying the scent of wood smoke mixed with melting pine. You realize how strange it is to feel grateful for mud, for dripping roofs, for the distant sound of running water. But here, it's not just change. It's proof that the world is still capable of forgiving itself. There's debate among historians about whether these late winter rituals, songs, offerings, gatherings by the river, were meant to summon spring or simply to thank the ice for leaving gently. Some call them ceremonies of renewal. Others think of them as pragmatic acts of observation, early weather-keeping disguised as faith. Sitting here now, you suspect those lines blur as easily as footprints in thawing snow. Gratitude, science, and survival are just three ways of saying the same thing. We're still here. The elder places a handful of embers into a clay bowl and sets it by the river's edge. The coals hiss as they meet the melting ice, releasing a puff of steam that smells faintly of cedar. Fire meets water, he murmurs. They argue, but they never forget each other. You smile at that, a perfect metaphor for everything you've seen. Warmth and cold, survival and surrender, always in conversation, never truly apart. You return to your lodge that night to the sound of dripping snow and distant laughter. The air inside feels lighter, the smoke gentler. The fire burns small but steady, a golden heart at the center of all this transformation. You lie back, close your eyes, and listen to the river's whisper through the walls. The cold has softened now, its grip loosening, and in its place comes the quiet rhythm of renewal. Slow, patient, unstoppable. When the thaw deepens, the camp begins to breathe differently. You can hear it in the footsteps, no longer the crunch of snow, but the soft squelch of melting ground. The air itself feels thicker, tinged with the smell of wet earth and smoke that clings like memory. The dogs bark more now, restless, their noses lifted toward the scent of distant herds. The cold hasn't vanished, it lingers in the wind's edge, but the people move as if they've already outsmarted it. This is the season of mending. Everywhere you look, hands are busy. Women rubbing grease into hides to soften them. Men tightening bindings on sleds and travois. Children running errands between fires with armfuls of rope. The camp is a symphony of repair, every sound a note of continuity. It's as if the people are reminding the land that they're not guests here. They're returning family. You crouch near a woman who is working with what looks like ash. She's smearing it over a fur blanket in smooth, circular strokes. The smell is faintly metallic, sharp but clean. Why ash, you ask? She smiles without looking up. The sun will come back soon. The ash teaches the fur not to fear it. You tilt your head, not quite following, and she laughs softly. It keeps the grease from spoiling when the heat returns, she explains. And the smoke scent tells the insects to find another home. You grin, humbled again by how wisdom hides inside poetry here. As you watch her work, she hums a tune under her breath, something low and steady, like the sound of wind through reeds. The melody carries easily across the camp, picked up by another voice, then another, until the air hums with harmony. You realize these songs aren't just entertainment. They mark rhythm, timing, even patience. You can hear the measure in each gesture. Rub, fold, hum, stitch, pull, exhale. Nearby, two men are scraping a hide stretched taut between poles. The sound is rhythmic, almost soothing, though the work looks brutal. One pauses to show you the tool, a sharp-edged stone fixed into a carved handle of elk bone. We clean it now, he says, so when it's soft again, it remembers. You run your finger along the hide. It's cold and stiff, but you can imagine it turning supple in their hands. Everything that keeps us warm, he adds, was once alive enough to teach us how. You sit with them for a while, listening to the scrape of stone on skin, the hiss of melting snow dripping from the poles above. The fires smoke thicker now, fed with damp wood, their scent earthy and heavy. You think about how many thousands of winters this rhythm has carried people through, how many small adjustments and remembered tricks have been passed from one generation to the next like invisible blueprints for survival. One of the older men pauses in his work and nods toward the sky. "See that?" he says. A thin line of geese crosses the horizon, faint but unmistakable. Their wings beat slow, deliberate, like a pulse steadying after a long illness. "They know it's safe again," he says softly. Around the camp, people stop what they're doing to look. The moment is small but electric, a spark of recognition between worlds. You remember reading once that migratory birds returning in early spring were more than just a sign of change. They were messages, living calendars marking the rhythm of survival. Some tribes timed their movement with the flocks, following the same invisible trails that tied earth to sky. You can see why. Watching the geese vanish into the pale distance, you feel something ancient stir. Proof that warmth, no matter how late, always keeps its promise. Later, as the sun dips low, the camp shifts again. Fires are fed higher, casting longer shadows. You notice a circle forming near the river's edge. Elders sitting close together, their faces glowing amber in the light. You draw nearer, and one of them gestures for you to sit. The air smells of sage and sweetgrass, and the smoke drifts upward in lazy spirals. The eldest woman speaks, her voice creased with age but strong. "When the rivers melt," she says, "we tell the stories again. We speak them aloud so they don't forget where they live." Her eyes glint like wet stones. A story that isn't spoken grows cold. You glance around, realizing that every fire here isn't just for warmth, it's for remembering. A young man tosses a handful of pine needles into the flames. They crackle sharply, sparks leaping skyward. "Each spark," he says with a grin, "is a promise to the next season." His words hang in the air, and someone claps him on the back. Laughter ripples through the circle, easy and genuine. You think how rare it is to see people laugh like that, with winter still at their heels but already forgiven. There's debate among modern historians about whether gatherings like these served as social events or spiritual renewal, whether they were meetings of survival plans or ceremonies of gratitude. But sitting here, watching smoke curl against the darkening sky, it's clear those categories don't exist here. Gratitude is practical, story is survival. The line between sacred and ordinary blurs until it disappears. When the stories end, people begin to drift back to their tents. The fires shrink, their glow dim but steady. You stay behind for a while, staring at the last few sparks fading into the night. The cold creeps close again, polite but persistent. You wrap your robe tighter and start back toward your shelter, your boots sinking into soft, wet snow. Inside, the air smells of ash and warmth. You lie down, listening to the faint drip of thawing ice from the roof. The lodge seems to breathe around you, walls expanding and contracting with the rhythm of cooling hides. Outside, a single goose cries once, far away. You close your eyes, and for the first time, the cold doesn't feel like an enemy. It feels like a teacher packing its lessons away, satisfied for now. Tomorrow there will still be frost, but tonight there's also water running under ice, and the quiet, certain sound of life coming back. By the time the rivers run freely again, the camp feels lighter, as if it's been exhaling for weeks without realizing it. The snow has retreated to the shadows, clinging stubbornly beneath trees and the north sides of hills, but the ground between lodges is dark and alive. Mud glistens under the morning light, steam rising where fires have thawed the earth. You step out, boots sinking just enough to make that satisfying wet sound that always announces spring. Someone is laughing nearby, a sound that feels new, unrestrained. You turn to see a group of children stomping barefoot in a puddle, shrieking as cold water splashes up their legs. Their mothers shout playfully from a distance, pretending disapproval but not stopping them. After months of confinement, even cold water feels like freedom. In the center of camp, people are tearing down winter shelters piece by piece. Hides are rolled carefully, poles stacked, cords coiled like sleeping snakes. The process looks almost ceremonial, but it's too efficient to be purely symbolic. You watch a man test a rope by wrapping it around his hand and pulling hard. It creaks but doesn't break. He grins, still strong, like us. A woman nearby tends to a pot of boiling sap, the sweet smell drifting across the camp like a promise. She gestures for you to come closer and dips a wooden ladle into the golden liquid. "First sugar," she says proudly. "The trees remember how to feed us." She drizzles a bit onto the snow beside her, where it hardens instantly into amber candy. She snaps a piece and hands it to you. It sticks to your teeth, both sweet and smoky, like sunlight made edible. You lick your fingers and she chuckles. "The children think it's magic," she says. And maybe it is. She explains that every spring they collect the sap from maple trees, cutting small notches and hanging birch bark bowls to catch the dripping sweetness. "It's a gift that melts before you can thank it," she says softly. "So you just keep living instead." Nearby, a group of men and women prepare new bark sheets for the coming summer lodges. They heat the bark gently over the fire, softening it so it bends without cracking. The air smells of wood smoke and new beginnings. You crouch beside one of them and touch the bark's surface. Warm, smooth, slightly tacky. The man nods approvingly. "That's spring bark," he says, "the kind that still remembers rain." He looks toward the hills where the forest glows faintly green with the first budding leaves. "The trees wake before we do," he adds. "They listen to the soil, not the sky." You watch as he bends the bark slowly into a curve, tying it to a wooden frame. The shape looks familiar, like the roof of a wigwam or maybe the hull of a canoe. He sees your recognition and smiles. "One shape serves many lives," he says. "That's how the world stays simple." The rhythm of rebuilding fills the air, hammering, stretching, laughter. Even the dogs seem livelier, darting between people, tails whipping through the mud. The camp is no longer a fortress against cold, but a hive of motion. Fire pits are cleaned, ash scattered into the river as offering. Someone smokes fish over a new rack, the fat sizzling as it drips into the flames. The smell is intoxicating, salt, wood, and a hint of sweetness from the sap smoke. You wander toward the edge of camp, where an older man is crouched beside a small mound of stones. He's pressing bits of moss and dried herbs between the rocks. "What's this?" You ask and he smiles. "A new hearth," he says. "We start the year with clean fire." He strikes 2 stones together and sparks leap out, catching on the dried moss. He blows gently and the flame blooms, small but fierce. "The old ashes stay behind," he murmurs. "They've already done their work." He stands, brushing his hands off, and gestures toward the smoking pile. "Every spring, we build our first fire with stone instead of coal. It reminds us the world can make warmth without us if it chooses." His tone is reverent, but there's humor in his eyes. "We're just borrowing it after all." You think about that for a moment. How every season here feels like a renewal of a contract between people and land. No ownership, no permanence, just understanding. It's so different from the idea of survival you grew up with, where warmth meant control and comfort meant isolation. Here, warmth is borrowed, shared, and returned. The day stretches long, and by evening, the air hums with the scent of sap and smoke. You find yourself sitting beside a fire with a circle of women sewing together soft furs for travel cloaks. One of them speaks without looking up. "Do you hear it?" she asks. You tilt your head. "The wind?" She shakes her head gently. "The ground. It's breathing again." You listen. Beneath the usual sounds, laughter, water, fire, you hear something deeper. A faint, wet rhythm, like the pulse of soil thawing beneath your feet. It's subtle but steady, and for a moment, you feel impossibly connected to it. There's a debate you recall from an old anthropology lecture, whether seasonal cycles like these shaped early spiritual beliefs, or were shaped by them. Did people build rituals around nature's rhythm? Or did the rhythm arise from the rituals themselves? Watching the camp now, you realize it doesn't matter. Faith and function have been dancing together for so long that no one remembers who led first. The woman beside you finishes sewing the edge of a cloak and drapes it over her shoulders. "Tomorrow we'll follow the herds," she says. "The grass is ready before we are." She looks toward the fading light. "But tonight, we rest in the world's warm breath." The firelight deepens, golden and soft. The air still carries a chill, but it's a kind one, the kind that brushes rather than bites. Children chase each other around the dying flames, their laughter blending with the crackle of sap-filled wood. The smell of maple candy and fish smoke lingers long after you lie down. As sleep creeps over you, you think of the river's thaw, of trees bleeding sweetness, of fire leaping from stone. The world feels alive again. And for the first time in months, the warmth you feel isn't borrowed, it's earned. The journey begins again under a sky the color of new steel. The land, once buried in snow, now stretches open, patches of green bleeding through the brown, the air trembling faintly with the hum of returning insects. You walk with the camp as it moves, a long procession of humans, dogs, and horses weaving across the thawing plains. The wind carries a scent you haven't smelled in months. Grass, wet and electric, the smell of life reminding the world what to do. The rhythm of travel feels almost musical. Poles drag behind the horses, their ends kicking up sprays of melting snow. Children ride in travois baskets, laughing whenever the path dips. Every so often, someone whistles to the dogs and the sound echoes across the hills like a bird call. There's no rush. The movement is slow, deliberate, more migration than march. You realize how different this feels from the migrations of modern life. No schedules, no finish lines, only direction. By midday, the camp stops at a ridge overlooking a valley streaked with streams. The water below glitters in veins of silver, feeding into a larger river that winds away toward the horizon. The leader, an older man with braids down his back, raises his hand. "Here," he says simply. The single word carries authority. Not the command of ownership, but recognition, as though the land itself had whispered its consent. Within minutes, the familiar choreography begins again. Poles are unfastened, hides unrolled, the circle of lodges rising like blossoms in a field. You watch the process from a small hill and realize how natural it looks. No blueprints, no shouting, just instinct and memory. Each lodge faces east toward the morning sun. You ask someone why and she smiles. That's where the fire is born. You wander closer to one family's camp, where a man is unpacking bundles wrapped in woven reeds. He pulls out a set of painted wooden masks. Bright reds, deep blacks, white lines curling into shapes that remind you of flames. He sets them beside the fire, careful, reverent. A small group gathers as he begins to tell a story, one about the old winter, a spirit with breath so cold it could turn rivers to stone. The masks, he explains, are worn during the first spring feast to remind the cold who truly rules the seasons. You notice that even the children treat the masks with respect, though one of them giggles when a gust of wind makes a mask's mouth seem to move. Later, as fires are lit, you sit among them, sharing roasted roots and strips of dried meat. The air vibrates with laughter. You can smell fat sizzling on coals and hear the hiss of water thrown onto hot stones. The people are celebrating, not grandly, but with quiet relief. You feel the collective exhale of 100 souls who have survived yet another winter. You think about how, centuries ago, explorers and traders would sometimes stumble upon camps like this and marvel at how quickly they appeared, how easily people adapted to both the harshest cold and the thaw. Some wrote about it with admiration, others with disbelief, as if mobility itself were a form of magic. Yet you see now that it isn't magic at all. It's knowledge woven into muscle and memory, the architecture of adaptation, built one winter at a time. As the sun sets, the valley glows copper and gold. The sound of singing drifts from the fires, a melody carried by wind, joined by drum beats that seem to echo from the earth itself. You feel your chest tighten, not from sadness but from something heavier, deeper, understanding. These people don't conquer their environment. They converse with it. They ask permission to survive. And somehow, the world always answers. A man sits beside you, rubbing his hands together for warmth. "Do you know why we move when the snow melts?" he asks, his eyes on the horizon. You shake your head. He smiles. "Because if we stay too long, the cold comes back to find us. It remembers." He chuckles softly, but there's truth in it. The kind of truth that lives in myth, because myth remembers what logic forgets. As the night grows darker, the drums fade into quiet conversation. Someone throws a handful of herbs into the fire and the flames flash blue for a heartbeat before returning to orange. "That's for the wind," a woman murmurs. "So it carries warmth, not warning." You can't help but think about how every act here, every song, every motion is a kind of offering, a negotiation with forces both real and imagined. There's an old argument you once heard among scholars that the practice of moving with the seasons was driven purely by practicality, not spirituality. They said the people followed food, not faith. But watching this valley come alive with laughter and firelight, you realize such distinctions crumble in the face of reality. For these people, food is faith and movement is prayer. To survive isn't to defy nature, it's to sing with it. A breeze drifts across the camp, carrying the mingled scents of wood smoke, wet grass, and cooked meat. The stars begin to prick through the fading blue, one by one, like embers caught in the vast dark. You tilt your head back, feeling the weight of the sky settle over you. Not oppressive, but protective. It's the same sky that watched over every camp before this one. The same stars reflected in rivers that have frozen and thawed 1,000 times. Somewhere nearby, a child's voice rises in song, soft, uncertain, yet filled with courage. It's the same tune you heard months ago when the snow was thick and the cold unrelenting. The melody hasn't changed, but its meaning has. What once sounded like defiance now sounds like gratitude. You lie back on the damp ground, watching the stars pulse brighter. The fire beside you crackles low, its heat gentle, familiar. You think about the first fires ever built on these plains, the first shelters that braved this wind, and how every night since has carried a piece of that original spark. Above you, the wind hums faintly, a voice too old to name, too soft to fear. You close your eyes, breathing in smoke and grass and the faint sweetness of spring. The warmth around you isn't fierce anymore. It's human, quiet, earned. The cold still lingers somewhere beyond the ridge, but for tonight, it has been outwitted again. The wind shifts again, this time carrying warmth that smells faintly of grass and distant rain. You wake before dawn to the soft shuffle of movement around camp. Fires are being stoked, water boiled, hides rolled. The sound is gentle, unhurried, like the murmuring of a heartbeat returning to its steady rhythm after a long sprint. You step outside your lodge, and the horizon is painted in a greyish gold that looks almost metallic. Spring sunlight filtered through the haze of last night's smoke. You can feel the world stretching awake. The horses snort and paw at the damp soil. Dogs chase shadows in the fog. In the distance, you can see herds beginning to return, dark shapes moving like slow tides across the greening plains. The people watch quietly, a reverence in their stillness. These aren't strangers returning. They're old allies, the bison, the deer, the life that makes all life possible here. As the camp prepares to move closer to the herds, you notice how each person knows exactly what to do without command. The roles are like threads in a woven pattern, each one distinct but inseparable. Men check weapons. Women pack the last of the tools. Children gather herbs from the thawing earth. The rhythm of survival continues, steady as breathing. A woman near you hums as she ties a bundle of dried roots to her pack. The melody is soft, cyclical, almost hypnotic. When you ask about it, she smiles. "It's a traveling song," she says. "It keeps your legs from getting tired." You grin, thinking it's a clever trick. "Does it work?" She nods. "Only if you believe it does." As you walk beside the procession later that morning, the wind picks up, brushing against the hides draped over the travois poles. The sound it makes is eerie and beautiful, like sighing voices hidden in the fabric. One of the elders chuckles when he sees you looking back. "The hides talk to the wind," he says. "They ask if it remembers us." You laugh softly, but there's something haunting about his tone, something that makes you think the wind probably does. When the camp finally halts by a river bend, the ground is soft, rich with new shoots. People move quickly to set up temporary shelters. Smaller, lighter teepees this time, their hides thinner, built for breezes instead of blizzards. Fires spark again, but the flames are smaller, content. The smell of burning sage drifts over the camp, mixing with the sharper scent of damp soil. An older man gestures for you to follow him to a ridge overlooking the plain. From here, the view is endless, waves of green rippling under a vast sky. He kneels and scoops a handful of earth, letting it crumble between his fingers. "The land's warm under the surface," he says quietly. "It never forgets us." You kneel beside him, touching the soil. It's true. The chill is gone, replaced by a deep, living warmth that feels almost like breath. He tells you stories as the morning unfolds, about how the people followed the bison across thousands of miles, living in rhythm with their migrations. "The animals showed us how to survive the cold," he says. "They taught us where the snow hides, where the wind rests, where the fire waits." His words paint pictures in your mind. Herds moving across frozen rivers, camps rising and falling like the heartbeat of the land. You think about what you've learned through this journey, how each tribe, each region, each climate forged its own dialogue with winter. From the birch bark lodges of the northern forests to the snow-covered igloos of the Arctic, from the plains teepees to the coastal plank houses, every shelter carries the same lesson. Warmth is not conquered, it's crafted. The man watches the horizon for a while, then chuckles. They say our ancestors learned to read the smoke before they could read the sky. You raise an eyebrow. Smoke? He nods, serious now. The way it moves tells you everything. If it curls low and thick, the air will stay cold. If it climbs straight, the wind will sleep. But if it dances sideways, he pauses, grinning. You pack fast and move quicker. You smile, loving the mix of science and superstition that lives in every word. Historians still argue about how much of this knowledge was intuitive versus observational, how much came from ritual and how much from raw survival. But standing here, feeling the wind shift against your skin, you know those lines don't matter. The lesson remains the same. Learn from what moves around you, and the world will keep you alive. As the day warms, the camp bursts into life again. Children chase each other with sticks, pretending to spear invisible bison. The hunters return with meat, laughter trailing behind them. A woman scrapes a hide clean, humming that same traveling song from earlier. The rhythm of her blade against the skin sounds like the pulse of time itself. Later, when the sky deepens to purple, the people gather by the water. Someone throws a handful of dried herbs into the river. The scent of cedar and sweetgrass fills the air. For luck, the old man says, and for next winter. You look out across the darkening land, where firelight flickers like constellations scattered across the earth. The sound of drumming rises again, deep and slow, echoing off the riverbanks. You close your eyes and let it wash over you. The heartbeat of generations, of fires tended and storms survived. You imagine all the winters that came before this one. All the people who once sat exactly where you are, whispering prayers to the same sky. The cold, you realize, was never just a season here. It was a teacher, and its lessons were carved into every shelter, every song, every memory. As the night deepens, the air cools again. But this time, it feels welcome. You pull your cloak tighter and glance up at the stars, sharp and bright, reflected in the river like sparks on black glass. Somewhere behind you, laughter carries through the wind. The camp settles slowly, each fire shrinking to embers, each voice softening to whispers. You lie back, letting the ground cradle you. The earth is no longer frozen, it's awake, alive, forgiving. You feel the faint warmth of its breath rising through the soil. Above, the stars shimmer, patient and knowing. You think of everything you've seen. The fires that outlasted storms, the lamps that burned through the polar dark, the hands that built warmth from nothing but courage and skill. The cold will come again, you know. It always does. But tonight, surrounded by laughter, firelight, and the smell of spring, you understand the secret that's kept these people alive for centuries. Winter can't defeat you if you've already learned to love its company. The days lengthen, soft and generous, stretching like golden threads across the prairie. You wake to the sound of birdsong again, a delicate, uncertain chorus that feels like the earth's first whisper after a long silence. The air is cool but forgiving, the kind of morning that smells of wet grass and firewood, long since burned down to comfort. Around the camp, people are already moving, their steps light, unhurried. The pace of survival has shifted now into the rhythm of living. You walk toward the river, where sunlight spills over the water in trembling ribbons. Children crouch at the edge, skipping stones that leap and vanish in glittering arcs. The laughter that follows is pure and unrestrained, the kind that only comes after enduring something immense. You find yourself smiling, not because you're amused, but because the sound itself feels like a reward. The elders sit together beneath a cottonwood tree, braiding rope and talking softly. You listen as one of them recalls the coldest winter of his youth, how the snow buried the lodges up to their smoke holes, how the stars looked close enough to touch, how they survived by sleeping in shifts so the fire never went out. His voice carries a hint of pride, but also wonder, as if he still can't quite believe they outlasted it. We didn't fight the cold, he says. We learned its songs. A younger man nearby adds, half joking, and we learned to snore loud enough to scare it away. The elders laugh, but their eyes glint with memory. You can see how much warmth exists even in stories of hardship. Each retelling is a kind of hearth built from words instead of wood. Later, as the camp begins to prepare for its next migration, you walk among the lodges one last time. The hides gleam faintly in the sun, smelling of smoke and pine sap. You notice small charms hanging from several doorways, bundles of feathers, bits of bone, even a carved wooden bead shaped like a bear's paw. You ask an elder woman about them, and she grins. "Those are winter's debts," she says. "Each one reminds us what we owe the season." You look closer and realize some are painted with tiny symbols, moons, stars, snowflakes, each representing a memory, a lesson, a moment survived. She leans on her walking stick, watching you with eyes that hold both humor and steel. "You see, we don't forget the cold," she says. "It keeps us humble. The first time you think you've beaten winter, that's when it wins." You nod, feeling the truth settle deep in your chest like embers finding their place. As midday passes, the camp slowly comes apart, the teepees collapsing one by one, leaving perfect circles of flattened grass where fires once burned. Horses snort as they're loaded. Children race through the fading smoke. The valley, once filled with voices, begins to quiet. Yet even as the people move on, the warmth lingers, held in the soil, the stones, the air itself. You realize that the land remembers too. You follow the group up the ridge, pausing once to look back. The river glints below, winding lazily through the valley. It's hard to imagine the same place buried under ice and silence just months ago. Everything that looked dead was only waiting, patient as breath. There's a gentle debate among some travelers as you walk, a conversation about whether the people will ever stop moving. One says yes, that one day they'll settle where the earth feels kindest. Another shakes his head. "If we stop," he says, "we stop listening." You find yourself thinking that maybe both are right, that movement isn't just travel, it's memory in motion, a way of keeping the lessons of winter alive even when the sun is high. The wind picks up, brushing across the grasses in your face. It's no longer sharp or cruel. It feels like a friend nudging you forward. You close your eyes for a moment, breathing it in, the scent of new life. Faint smoke and distant rain fills you completely. That night, when camp settles again beneath an open sky, the stars seem closer than before. Fires burn smaller now, more for comfort than necessity. The people gather in quiet circles, speaking softly, their words blending with the hum of crickets and the gentle rush of river water nearby. The cold, though faint, still lingers in the wind's edges, like an old teacher keeping watch from a distance. You sit alone for a while, watching sparks rise into the sky and vanish. You think of every fire you've seen on this journey, each one different yet all the same, a fragile defiance wrapped in tenderness. Fire was never just warmth. It was a declaration that life refused to end quietly. And then comes the quiet you didn't expect. The peaceful kind. The one that arrives only when you understand something fully. You realize that warmth isn't a thing to possess, but to practice. The people who lived here didn't merely survive the cold. They partnered with it. Every shelter, every song, every ember was a love letter to the balance between suffering and resilience. When you finally lie down, the earth beneath you feels soft, alive. The stars flicker overhead like watchful eyes. The last flames of the campfires dim to embers, glowing faintly through the night air. You breathe deeply and feel, for the first time, not like an outsider looking in, but part of the same. Endless rhythm, the pulse of heat and frost, movement and rest, loss and renewal. The world turns quietly around you. Somewhere far off, a wolf howls, not in hunger, but in acknowledgement. You smile, half asleep, knowing what it means. Another winter has ended, another story begun. So now, as the fires fade and the night deepens, take a breath. You've walked the long arc of winter beside people who understood warmth better than any blanket or hearth could ever teach. You've felt the cold in your bones and the fire in your chest, and somewhere between those two extremes, you've found peace. Close your eyes for a moment. Picture the tents, those graceful cones of hide and smoke, glowing softly under a velvet sky. Picture the river, once frozen, now whispering to itself beneath the stars. The air carries the memory of snow, but also the scent of grass and the hum of insects returning. The world is mending itself, and you're part of that quiet repair. Imagine lying back, wrapped in fur and firelight, hearing the low murmur of stories fading into dreams. The cold waits at the edge of the world, but it's patient now, respectful. It knows you've earned your rest. The flames flicker one last time, painting shadows that look like wings, like prayers, like history breathing. Let your breath slow. Let your heartbeat find the rhythm of the wind. You're safe here, suspended between centuries, between warmth and night. The story isn't ending. It's only sleeping, the way the land sleeps, waiting to wake again when the frost returns.